One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 141 to 160. Chapter 141 Mental Retardation. Although the three of Jongyang have never been to Sky Island, after all, Jongyang is a man who has read the original book. After reaching Sky Island through the huge ocean current, Jongyang paid 100,000 Bailey directly here in charge of entry. This is considered an official entry. The Sky Island. I remember when Enel became a god in the 14th year of the Great Pirate. According to this, it seems that it is still a few years away. Seeing that this day was a white cloud and a white cloud, I didn't know where the publicity was, and suddenly thought of it. A very important matter, what if Enel hadn't come to Sky Island at this time? Jongyang closed his eyes slightly in anxiety, and the observation Haki Reiatsu quickly swept away like a tide. But I couldn't find Enel's Reiatsu when I searched around. Could it be that my observation Haki Reiatsu range is not enough? So I muttered in my heart. I remember Enel was in Burka at first. I asked some winged residents of Sky Island, and everyone came to Sky Island. Jongyang was about to use observation Haki to find Enel, but suddenly an epiphany struck, and the voice mixed with Reiki reverberated in Burka. Enel, you Pikachu, don't want to eat apples in the future. You still want to go back to the realm of gods like this. Do your daydreams, you can never become gods. When Jongyang's hoarse voice came out, Enel and the pirate next to him were stunned for a moment, but after a glance at Jongyang, the ego became up. Instead, the pirate asked curiously, Boss, who is this Enel? Ah, does that work? If it doesn't work, I'll jump off here and kill myself right now. Before the sound fell, an electric light suddenly flashed in the air. The next moment, a naked upper body, 8-pack abs, and 4 drummers with 3 goose jade engraved behind them appeared in front of them. He held a long stick in one hand, looked at the crowd contemptuously, and ate apples. Who are you calling me? Who even uttered mad words, depriving God of the right to eat apples and daring God not to return to his own land? I think you mortals don't want to live anymore. Fighting against the gods will not end well. Enel's temperament is very low. Jongyang knew it, but when he heard what he said, Jongyang couldn't help laughing. How naive! If God were like this, he could go to kindergarten. Would you like to try Hawkeye? But having said that, Enel at this time is much younger than when the original book appeared, but his strength is unambiguous, and even Hawkeye on the side has a strong fighting intent. Jongyang glanced at Hawkeye and said casually. Hawkeye's eyes narrowed, and when his golden pupils stared at Enel, he directly pulled out the black knife behind his back. Seeing the knife, Enel's eyes lit up and said, Mortal, just give this knife to me, and I will give it to me. Forgive you to look at me like this, and forgive your blasphemy against God. Quote. But Hawkeye will take care of Enel's words. The next moment he pulls out the black knife, he cuts straight forward. In an instant, a huge knife gas gallops towards Enel with a fierce momentum. On the way to the past, on the clouds on the ground leaving a shocking crack. Mortals are not weak. Do you want to consider being my priest? You will eat apples every day. Seeing the knife chi rushing forward, Enel didn't seem to have a trace of solemnity. Instead, he ate up the apple in his hand, and then said leisurely, Can you be faster than thunder? Teleport. Just as the sword chi was about to touch Enel's whole body was directly elementalized. After the sword chi flashed by, Enel had already appeared on the other side. The speed of thunder should be faster than light. It can be compared with my instant body, but at a long distance, I am far behind. Jongyang was a little shocking, and he secretly weighed it in his heart. At this time, Hawkeye's complexion became gloomy, leaving a wave of ability on the ground. The figure ran rampant in the sky, and there were bursts of ghostly flames in the air. As the flames in the sky rushed towards Enel at high speed like raindrops, Hawkeye also blasted towards Enel with a black knife in hand. Conqueror Haki rushed towards Enel like a tide. I'm a god, why don't you give up? Discharge billion volts. Enel was stunned for a moment when he felt this and suppressed momentum, but as the arcs overflowed all over his body, he directly resisted each other. With a wave of his hand, the huge thunder and lightning that appeared out of thin air directly collided with the ghost fire. When the roars sounded one after another, the ghost fire and the thunder and lightning cancelled each other out. Immediately after, the figure of Hawkeye appeared in front of Enel. When the sword was slashed, Enel's wrist burst into a straight line of lightning, which slightly resisted Hawkeye's slash, but was directly broken by Hawkeye at the next moment. Slash directly at Enel. However, Enel immediately became elemental and disappeared in place. In a single move, the two were even on a par, which not only surprised Hawkeye, but also surprised Enel. His face suddenly became solemn. He took out a red apple from nowhere and took a bite. "You should know very well, I am a thunder. No matter how hard you struggle, humans can't beat thunder. Even if you grew up on land, you have seen thunder in the distance." As soon as he finished speaking, Enel found that the apple in his hand was gone, and said, "Where is my apple? Try it, how does it taste?" Zhang Yang did not know when an apple appeared in his hand, but he was about to bite it, but found that the body could not be eaten, so he threw it to the horrified pirate next to him. "Yummy." Quote. Zhang Yang Isho looked at Enel with an ugly face and said, "Shao I, are you interested in joining our pirate group? I am a god." Enel looked disdainful, and took out another apple to chew on. "God, your brother-in-law, and I know a world that only gods can go to. Do you want to go?" "I am a god, how can I be your subordinate, that? What world are you talking about, where is it? I'll tell you if you join me. I am a god, you should still be my subordinate. God can take you to the god's world you mentioned." Mentally retarded. Chapter 142 Go to Hell. Mentally retarded, I beat you, then you follow me. Zhang Yang found that Enel's brain was really lacking and was extremely mentally retarded, and Zhang Yang concluded that if Enel didn't have the ability of Guro Guro no Mi, Rumble Rumble Fruit, he would definitely be chased and beaten all day long, and he would not be beaten in the end. To die is to be killed by many people, there is no other possibility. I'm a god, and I won't go with you no matter what. Besides, how could you be a mere mortal to defeat me, even though I feel like you're not a ghost or a ghost? Enel didn't wake up, ate all the apples, and looked at Zhang Yang lazily with disdain. I'm the god of death who controls the life and death of the gods. Even if you are a god, it depends on what I mean if you want to die alive. Zhang Yang picked up a sword flower with the 3 generations of ghosts, and when his bloody eyes looked at Enel, his hoarse voice came out one after another, I'll give you one last chance. I'm the strongest Logia capable person. Besides, with your broken knife, I'm. Before Enel could finish speaking, the 3-generation ghost in Zhang Yang's hand threw it in the air for a few spins and was caught by the pirate. Then the figure galloped away and disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already in front of Enel. Armament hockey slammed into his chest with a sharp breath. Physical attacks are against me. But at this moment, when Zhang Yang's fist was about to touch Enel's body, the disdain in Enel's eyes suddenly disappeared, his complexion suddenly changed, his figure became elemental without hesitation, and the electric light flashed on the other side. You be faster than Ray. Shall I? A hoarse voice suddenly sounded behind Enel, and Enel disappeared in a blink of an eye, but every time the figure of publicity appeared either in front of him or behind him. You've angered me, prepare to accept the wrath of God. Zhang Yang was also a little shocked. With Enel's strength combined with Guro Guro no Mi, Rumble Rumble Fruit, the speed of the instant was too fast. If the distance was longer, it would be difficult for him to catch up. Eagle-eyed boss, do you think this Enel is mentally retarded? Why does he always like to say such mentally retarded things before fights? It's mentally retarded, and it really sucks. Although the pirates over there were shocked by the speed of the two, they were even less interested in Enel and shouted at Zhang Yang, Boss, beat him up. A mere mortal dares to insult God. Enel stretched out his hand, and a straight line of lightning quickly shot towards the pirate, but at the same time, Zhang Yang's voice had appeared behind him. Even if it's a god, you can't be distracted by fighting. Enel saw Hawkeye appearing in front of the pirate, he picked up the knife and directly shoved the lightning into the sky. He was unwilling, but the next moment he heard the sound, his face changed, but even if he wanted to, it's too late. When Zhang Yang appeared behind Enel's, he kicked Armament's leg directly towards Enel's waist. The huge impact made Enel's figure explode like a kite with a broken string, and finally knocked down the house. Shall I consider coming with me? Imagine, in a world full of gods, you go to dominate and slap your face one by one, wouldn't it be cool? There are all kinds of things, all turned into ashes, and the blades are like fire. After Zhang Yang's words fell, his face changed suddenly, without any hesitation. Lu Ren Ruohuo appeared directly in his right hand, the corner of his mouth murmured, he turned his hand, and a powerful flame erupted from the blade, wrapping around him like a coiled dragon. The surrounding temperature suddenly became hot. Holding the hilt of the knife with both hands, holding the flowing blade Ruohuo and swiping forward, a blade gas wrapped in flames tyrannically went forward like a setting sun, and the blade gas emitted a burst of thunder and lightning. A roar bumped into each other. The collision continued for a few breaths, as if no one could do anything to the other. The two exploded in midair, and when a violent impact was set off, Zhang Yang's figure suddenly disappeared, and the sound of the knife and stick colliding in midair suddenly sounded. Your sword seems to be more powerful than that mortal's sword. Give it to me, or you will regret it. You must know that the power of God is more than that. Enel saw the flaming long knife in Zhang Yang's hand, his eyes lit up, and he said somewhat bewitched. Really? Zhang Yang took advantage of the moment when Enel spoke, wrapped his feet with armament reiki, and smashed him heavily on his chest, but Enel's chest was covered with lightning, and he used the electric light to resist the blow, and the figure just took a few steps backwards. And Zhang Yang used the counter-impact force, and the figure burst back out. At the same time, the flowing blade swung violently like fire, and when the sea of fire instantly appeared, the clouds on the ground were rendered like burning clouds. Songming. Smelling the danger, Enel's expression suddenly became solemn, and he directly tapped the taiko on his left shoulder, transforming the thunder and lightning he made from the taiko, and finally formed a phoenix-like thunderbird. At the same time, he continued to tap the drum on his right shoulder, and a wolf-shaped thunder wolf appeared. Finally, the drums on both shoulders were struck at the same time, and a huge thunder dragon climbed the sky like an emperor. 30 million volt ptarmigan, 30 million volt ptarmigan. 60 million volts Trotron. Come on, let this idiot know the price of blasphemy. Between the heavens and the earth, the lightning and the flames are almost divided into resistance, allowing the flame tornado to mix with the three giant beasts, but it is more accurate that the lightning is constantly eroding the flame, and it will break through it in the next moment, biting towards Zhang Yang. Come. And 200 million volts for. I'm a god, the power you control is completely useless to me, meaningless. Go to hell. Enel released all the 200 million volts of lightning from his body, and when he wrapped himself around him, like a god of thunder, the lightning continued to wander around his body. At this moment, the thunderbirds and thunder beasts in the tornado have been exhausted, and although the thunder dragon's light has dimmed a little at this moment, the flame tornado is already faintly about to collapse, turning into Enel, the god of thunder, and a huge punch directly breaks through the dragon. Volume rides Thunder Dragon and smashes towards Zhang Yang. At this moment, the world seems to have become a world of thunder and lightning, like the end. Chapter 143 Wordless Tombstone. Fuck, Pikachu discharges, it is only 100 million volts than Kapika, this mental retardation is a mutant. Even though he thought so, Zhang Yang's eyes were extremely horrified, and his eyes were completely occupied by lightning. Guro Guro no mi, rumble rumble fruit, it really is Logia's strongest fruit, I can't imagine that after the fruit awakens, what would it be like? Alas. After regaining his senses, Zhang Yang felt helpless again. In my current body, I released an incomplete Benkai when I fought Hawkeye last time, and the sequelae were too great. I finally recovered a little, this time can't be so weak. Zhang Yang took out 2 gloves from his hands and put them on his hands, looking at Enel, who turned into a thunder god in the thunder and lightning, with a touch of guilt in his heart. If you want to blame it, I have learned well, I know that rubber insulated lightning well. Zhang Yang's action of wearing gloves caught everyone's attention, but they were all stunned, not understanding why Zhang Yang was wearing gloves at this juncture. Be careful, old man. The world recruitment is now in the preliminary stage. The recruiting process is nothing more than a competition with each other. Whoever is stronger will be promoted. This time, the world recruitment clearly stipulates that one admiral, several vice admiral, and other marines will be promoted. Because it is just the beginning, so there is no strong competitor yet, but maybe, they are still hiding their strength, waiting for the final outbreak. In short, although the world's recruitment time is stipulated as 1 year, it is usually only half a year at most. And when the world government was in full swing, there was a gloomy forest on a certain isolated island in the New World, where there was no sunlight all day long, not even birdsong, only the occasional sound of crows wafting through the forest. The space is separated, and the boundary appears. A spotless man in ancient warrior clothes appeared, with a star hoop on his head, a long sword in his fingers, and a pair of indifferent glasses revealing a little doubt. Is this place? Where is Captain Yamamoto hiding? I hope the Technology Development Bureau doesn't make any mistakes. After finishing speaking, the man waved his knife and scattered countless cherry blossoms flying, forming a pair of cherry blossom wings behind them and flying into the sky. Towards the horizon of the sea. Not far away, there was a search of marine warships. Seeing the biological aura, the man's expression changed and he flew down. In another place, in Burka on Sky Island, Enel's mouth-opening boss looked at the black-robed figure in front of him in shock. How is it possible, even if you can stop it, you won't be so unscathed? Would you like to try again? When Zhang Yang's hoarse voice came out, Enel didn't believe in evil, 60 million volts Trojans. Enel tapped the drums on both shoulders at the same time. As soon as a huge thunder dragon appeared, it rushed towards Zhang Yang like a grin, and Zhang Yang raised one hand. In the end, Zhang Yang was not injured at all, but Thunder Dragon had disappeared in the sky. How is it possible? Zhang Yang looked at Enel and said, "Shall I, willing to admit defeat and join my pirate group? I am a god, it is impossible to lose, you must be cheating, and I will not be your subordinate." Enel said disdainfully. Zhang Yang didn't speak. Vivi shook his head and said to Hawkeye, "Let's go." Did the boss not let him on board? The pirate who had been following asked suspiciously. I just want to be a mortal who stays in this small place. I also want to take him to the new world to explore, and then he will become a god in this world. Now, since he doesn't want to go, I don't bother to take him. Zhang Yang said something and turned around to leave. Wait. Enel immediately spoke with a look on his face, but seeing Zhang Yang ignored him, he appeared in front of Zhang Yang in an instant and said, "Don't worry, I'm a god, what you said is true." Fake. Zhang Yang said to Hawkeye, "Eagle Eye, you probably haven't seen the Ark Proverbs, let's go, I'll show you. No one has ever been able to start a proverb but me." Enel said triumphantly. I didn't say I was going to start it. After reading it, I believe I still have the ability to destroy it. Hawkeye, you say yes. After Zhang Yang finished speaking, Hawkeye had a black line, but Vivi nodded. From the beginning to now, he felt more and more that there must be something wrong with this man who claimed to be a god. In other words, he was mentally retarded. Moreover, this mentally retarded was fooled by Zhang Yang, and even he couldn't stand it any longer. Don't, I can't go with you. But let me bring some apples. A huge ship is surrounded by thunder and lightning, driving in the sky with a humming sound. The most shocking thing is the huge going on the deck, which is faintly carved into the appearance of a person, and this ship is only Guro. Guro no mi, rumble rumble fruit, the Ark motto can only be controlled by those with the ability. I said, did you bring some apples? Looking at the apples piled up in the House of Proverbs, Zhang Yang swallowed and asked Enel, you obviously brought all the apples in Sky Island. Yeah, do you want to eat it? Sky Island, apples are very delicious, and eating apples can improve your IQ. Haven't you seen that this god is so smart? Zhang Yang was too lazy to care about Enel, and said to Hawkeye, there should be someone you are interested in the Devil's Delta, or on the ship of Gecko Moria. Who? A generation of great swordsmen. Chapter 144 Sending Shadows. The specific candidates for Shichibukai, Marine has not fully announced, but Marine's huge power is naturally exposed, such as the world's largest swordsman Hawkeye, and red-haired Shanks, Gecko Moria, Sand Crocodile. Hawkeye, as far as you know, has anyone else agreed to join King Shichibukai? The arc proverbs hovered high in the sky, making a humming sound. Zhang Yang sat on the deck and looked to the side of Hawkeye. Apart from me, there are only Gecko Moria and Bartholomew Kuma at the moment. Hawkeye was wiping Hideaway at this time, and when he heard Zhang Yang's question, he said without stopping his movements. Gecko Moria. Zhang Yang murmured to himself, and then sighed. Forget it, although he is relatively powerful, but this person is not used to it. Let's kill it, but the shadow of Brokon Ryoma must be paid back, but it will be paid back. The dragon horse is useless. The stronger the shadow, the stronger the dragon horse is. Ordinary people have their shadows cut off, can't look in mirrors, can't bask in the sun, then their bodies will slowly die. That's right. Zhang Yang said to Hawkeye, since you and Gecko Moria are already in the trenches and are both members of the King Shichibukai, then since this is the case, I have a plan. Time passed, and when the proverb stopped in midair, Zhang Yang said to Enel, just eat apples on the boat and wait for us to come back. Good. Enel answered very quickly, but the next moment Zhang Yang felt that something was wrong, and then said, forget it, you'd better go down with us. I am a god, how can I run? Enel said angrily. I didn't say you run, one more person has more combat power, isn't it? Zhang Yang turned his head to the pirate and said, Karusen, you stay on the boat. Remember to take care, my motto. Hawkeye said a word, and was directly pushed off the boat by Zhang Yang. Where does all the nonsense come from? What is your heart for eating? Hawkeye, Enel, and Zhang Yang didn't live easily. They all had their own way to reach the ground from high altitude. Xiao-ai, a pillar of thunder fell from the sky. When reaching the ground of the island, or on the boat, in the forest, Zhang Yang said to Enel. That's not thunder pillar, it's God's sanction. Enel took a bite out of Apple's dissatisfied mouth, but he did as he did, his wrist turned into lightning, and when Vivi lifted up, a shocking thunder pillar smashed down from the sky, and when there was a roar, the whole ground shook. Stand up. Who? Suddenly, two figures jumped out of the forest and appeared in front of Zhang Yang and the others. Aren't these two of Hogbuck's men? Looking at the figure of a man and a woman in front of him, a hoarse voice came out. Abu Siram, Perona, right. Who are you? Perona spoke softly. I'm looking for Gecko Moria. Hawkeye, who was standing behind the two, stepped forward from the shadowed position at this time, looked at the two weirdos and said. Hawkeye Mahawk. Both of them were stunned for a moment. They all knew that Hawkeye and their master, Gecko Moria, had now become Shichibukai, the king. As they spoke, a dark shadow galloped towards the crowd. Eagle-eyed Mahawk, I don't know why you asked me personally. This strange-looking, huge figure is naturally Gecko Moria. When he saw the golden-eyed man in front of him, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He also saw the sensation caused by this huge thunder column, and he came here because he was afraid of something. There should be a swordsman named Ryoma on your ship. The world government has a life. I will give you the shadow of this person, so that you can fill the body of that named Ryoma and exert its maximum combat power. After all, you are in difficulty now. All know. Hawkeye's face was red and he said slowly, and on the way, he glanced at Zhang Yang. Gecko Moria was stunned for a moment, looked at the black-robed figure next to him, and said suspiciously, is he strong? Besides, how could the world government do such a thing? There shouldn't be any conspiracy. Although Zhang Yang's face shocked him, he was also a man who had fought with Kaido after all, so it's no surprise that all kinds of doubts came to mind at this moment, thinking about what conspiracy there was. Would you like to play against each other and give it a try? Hawkeye's words fell, Gecko Moria's eyes flashed, and his lips murmured. His shadow directly turned into a black spear, with a fierce momentum, shot towards Zhang Yang's forehead. When there seemed to be a bright light on the 3-generation Gouche sword in Zhang Yang's hand, and the next moment it was directed towards the shadow gun that blocked Gecko Moria. Not only that, but also shot it back. Yes, the current shadow is much stronger than that swordsman, but why is the world government so kind? Gecko Moria knew that the man in black robe in front of him hadn't done his best, but in this move, he actually saw the strength of Zhang Yang's strength. Although he was shocked, he still couldn't understand the intention of this behavior. No matter how strong you are not considered an opponent of the government. Your spear will go directly to the pirates. If you haven't made up your mind, you can talk to the world government yourself. I still have something to do. After saying that, Hawkeye turned around and was about to walk away, while Enel looked sluggish, didn't understand what Hawkeye was talking about, and wanted to ask, but when he saw Zhang Yang's stare, he immediately shut his mouth and turned to nibble on the apple. Hawkeye, then thank you very much. After thinking about it, Gecko Moria felt that there was something weird, but after thinking about it, he didn't find any strength that was not good for him. If Hawkeye wanted to take this zombie as his own, it would be even more impossible, unless he killed him. However, he and Hawkeye have no grudges in the near future, and they are both Shichibukai under the king. Ideally, this is not possible. Thinking of this, Gecko Moria was relieved. There was nothing to say along the way. In addition to the gloomy environment around, the atmosphere was very strange. After a while, they came to a ruin and saw a man in a tattered white kimono. Figures are constantly walking, as if aimlessly. This is the dragon horse. Chapter 145, The Powerful Dragon Horse. In a ruin, a figure was walking aimlessly, exuding a strong sense of death. He was dressed in a tattered white kimono with a traditional Chinese character tattooed on both sleeves. Short gray hair. The strangest thing is that the shadow is not his own shape, but a skeleton. There is a knife around his waist. This person is the legendary swordsman, Longma, and the knife around his waist is the Dakue Dao 20. One of the black knife autumn water. Come here. Gecko Moria gave an order, and Ryoma's body seemed to be walking uncontrollably towards this side, like a walking corpse. This knife, Black Sword Knight, one of the 12 masters of the Supreme Sword. Walking in front of Gecko Moria, Ryoma saw the black knife behind Hawkeye's eyes at a glance. At this moment, the originally empty eyes seemed to be bursting with light. I can't say that you have great luck, and someone sent a powerful shadow for you. Gecko Moria didn't talk nonsense, and directly activated the fruit ability, ready to draw out the shadow of Zhang Yang, but the next moment his face changed suddenly. Cold sweat covered his forehead, as if he had spent a lot of effort to pull out the shadow of Zhang Yang. At the same time, the shadow under the dragon horse was easily pulled out, and then as the shadow disappeared, the dragon horse froze and fell directly to the ground. That is, at this time, Gecko Moria put Zhang Yang's shadow on the dragon horse with difficulty. When all the shadows of Zhang Yang appeared at the feet of the dragon horse, a strange red light appeared in the 2 hollows on the skull of the dragon horse, like eyes, and at the same time, a very strong momentum directly appeared at this moment. It surged up and spread out around with the dragon horse as the center. Under this powerful momentum, except for Enel, Zhang Yang and Hawkeye, everyone in the room, including Gecko Moria, staggered and took a few steps back. When the figure stopped, looking at Ryoma with a shocked expression, how? Maybe it's so strong. Ha ha ha, with such a strong zombie, I can go hunting for the strong ones. After a few years and building up a group of strong zombie army, I can return to the new world again and challenge Kaido of the beasts. After the shock, Gecko Moria laughed madly. And Enel and Hawkeye also looked solemn. Even the mastermind of all this, Zhang Yang himself, did not expect that Ryoma was so strong at the moment, but he just didn't know whether his strength was stronger or weaker than he is now. But even so, it was enough to be publicized and shocked. It seems that this step has made a profit. I will accept you as the general of our zombie army in the future, ha ha ha. Gecko Moria turned around Ryoma while smiling, as if seeing the future from Ryoma and the hope of defeating Kaido. It's still the shadow that's comfortable, and it almost restores me to a strength similar to when I was at the peak. Morning straight stab. Ryoma twisted his neck, pulled out the black knife Chushui in his hand, picked a sword flower, and whispered. The black knife Chushui seemed to emit a looming mist, and Longma raised the black knife Chushui and pointed straight ahead. Suddenly stabbed forward. At the moment of stabbing, an extremely strong sword chi burst out from the knife, and stabbed forward, leaving a long and shocking crack on the ground. All have a round hole that seems to be poked by sword energy. Almost recovered. Isn't this not his peak strength? Hawkeye looked at the power of Longma's blow, wrinkled his eyes, and looked solemn. Could it be true that Longma was the greatest swordsman in the world hundreds of years ago? Fate Song, Man and Knife are one. Following the murmur, the dragon horse seemed to have merged with the black sword Chushui in his hand, exuding a strong sword energy, and everyone hurriedly retreated. With the continuous spread of sword chi, the surrounding area of Longma has become a vacuum field, and the sword chi swept wildly in it, and even there was no air here. And then the next moment, it all returned to his body. And at the same moment, Gecko Moria shouted, "How is it possible? How can I lose control of you? As a swordsman, what I hate most is to be someone else's puppet, to be a tool for others to kill." The figure of Ryoma suddenly disappeared in place, and at this moment, Gecko Moria felt a death crisis shrouded in his heart like a shadow, making him a little breathless. At the same time, Ryoma came from behind him. The sound of Walt's tip touch. Longma raised the sword, and a strong sword chi seemed to have been gathering at the position of the sword tip. When the tip of the sword touched the position of Gecko Moria's back and heart, blood immediately flowed, and the sword chi continued to rage in. Shadow Mage, Shadow Stand. Gecko Moria spit out a mouthful of blood. When a shadow clone appeared, he did not hesitate to switch positions with the shadow. At this time, the two weirdos under his command had already come to both sides of the dragon and horse, in a pinch attack. Ryoma's face did not change color, and when the black knife Chushui slashed Gecko Moria's shadow clone with a knife, a gust of wind was entangled in the long knife. With him as the center, he rose instantly. The hurricane directly swept Abu Siram into it, and Perona directly activated his fruit ability to escape from here when he didn't feel good. When Abu Siram was caught in the tornado, he screamed again and again. Until a certain moment, when the tornado in the raging sword chi dissipated, it was terrible to see Abu Siram, who was like a bloody man, fell directly from the sky, and when he hit the ground, he had already lost his vitality. It's very similar to my Song Ming. Zhang Yang looked at this scene with surprise in his eyes, but Gecko Moria's face was gloomy at the moment. Now the Ryoma has been out of his control. If it continues like this, Ryoma will definitely kill him. Thinking of this, he will ask for help. His eyes turned to Hawkeye. "Hawkeye, we are the same King Shichibukai, help me kill this traitorous zombie." Chapter 146 Zombie Fire. Hawkeye has been silent all the time, staring at Ryoma. At the same time, a fighting spirit is rising all over his body. Seeing that Hawkeye didn't seem to hear what he said, Gecko Moria's face suddenly turned gloomy, but in this situation, he can only pull face. "Hawkeye, just think I fell for your favor, and now the dragon horse has been out of my control. If it continues like this, it will be a disaster. You help me get rid of this zombie, I will explain it from the world government." Quote. When the sound came out, Hawkeye still didn't move at all, or he didn't hear it on purpose. This made Gecko Moria's face look ugly, and a faint anger rose up. At this moment, he even scolded, "I was originally here. Okay, even if this shadow was sent by the world government, but the present tense is out of control, but you are watching from the sidelines." But at this moment, Zhang Yang took a step forward, and a hoarse voice suddenly came out. Ryoma, are you interested in joining my pirate group? Gecko Moria stretched out his finger and pointed at Zhang Yang, with an incredible look on his face. Ghost. At this time, Ryoma's attention shifted from Gecko Moria to Zhang Yang, and as soon as he caught his eye, he saw the dark sword with flame patterns in Zhang Yang's hand, and his voice suddenly became solemn. No, this is not the ghost at that time. Have you seen this knife? Seeing that Longma seemed to be very interested in this knife, Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, and then said, there are 3 generations of the ghost, the first generation of the Supreme Dakue Dao, the second generation of the Dakue Dao, and the third generation of the Kue Dao, and this is 3 generations. Quote. The evil thoughts are so strong. It should be a generation of ghosts. Ryoma's whisper was heard by Zhang Yang, and he said in surprise, have you ever met the Gorosei, 5 elders who hold a generation of ghosts? Gorosei, 5 elders. A strange title. Hearing the surprise in Longma's voice, Zhang Yang pondered for a moment, thoughtful. Ryoma, fight with me. Hawkeye pulled out the supreme big sword Haishaye from behind, and pointed the tip of the sword directly at Ryoma, Eagle Eye Mahawk. Having one of the only 12 supreme knives left, you must not be a mediocre person. Wanokuni, Ryoma. Longma swung the black sword Chushui forward in his hand, and in an instant, a dark purple sword energy ripped through the air and collided directly with the dark blue sword energy cut out by Hawkeye. As the 2 sword chi competed with each other, just before they dissipated, the dragon horse and the eagle-eyed figure fought together, and the sound of the sword filled all directions. Open. When Hawkeye left a faintly visible ripple on the bottom of his feet, he galloped towards the dragon and horse, but the figure suddenly disappeared in the middle, and at the same time, the figure of the dragon and horse suddenly blurred, and when the figure disappeared in place, a collision sounded in the air. Voice. Black knife flash. Hum song 3 small swallow tail cut. When the 2 of them reappeared on the ground, they were already back to back, but there was a knife mark on their chests, and blood spilled out, but the next moment they turned around, holding the knife, both sides fought together again. Gollum. Looking at this scene, Gecko Moria swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and his eyes were shocked. He knew the prestige of the world's largest swordsman, Eagle Eye, but at this moment, he saw that his zombie could be on an equal footing with Eagle Eye. Gecko Moria was terrified. Looking at Ryoma with some fear, Gecko Moria's figure moved, immediately turned and galloped into the forest, and disappeared from everyone's sight in a blink of an eye. I must hurry back to the world government and sue Hawkeye, fuck it. Quote. Shall I, catch up and kill Gecko Moria, don't say you can't. When the hoarse voice entered Enel's mind, Enel's action of eating the apple suddenly stopped, and he became unhappy. I'm a god, I'm too lazy to move, you can go by yourself. Since this is the case, I don't need you to think about it. I will go by myself. You can consider the consequences. The voice fell, and Zhang Yang didn't even move at all, but Enel looked flustered and obviously didn't notice this. After putting all the apples in his mouth, after Zhengang determined the position, the whole body turned into lightning, and the figure disappeared in place in an instant. Zhang Yang watched the battle between the 2 and secretly had fun in his heart. The stronger the dragon and the horse, the greater the effect on him, but even if he paid attention to this, he also paid attention to Gecko Moria. After all, Shichibukai has only a few positions. You can't just let this guy take away a spot. At this time, Longma and Hawkeye were fighting fiercely. Longma kept stabbing black swords and using sword energy, like bullets, constantly blasting towards Hawkeye. Although Hawkeye had been defending all the time, he was looking for opportunities for defense. For offense. In short, the 2 are on the same level. Even if one side is on defense, it is only temporary. The roles of offense and defense are constantly changing during the battle. The dark fire has already smashed towards the dragons and horses like falling rain. No, why didn't you remind Hawkeye about this? Zhang Yang's expression changed, and he was about to make a move, but it was too late. The dragon horse, who was constantly resisting the Eagle Eye's offensive, was accidentally ignited by a fire. In an instant, the blue flame rose directly, covering the figure of the dragon and horse. Ryoma looked calm and muttered, "I lost." Hawkeye's expression changed, and there was some unknown situation. At this time, he only heard Ryoma say, "Once the body of a zombie gets on fire, it will ignite the fire of life and never stop until it turns to ashes." Ryoma, you are different from other zombies. Even if you have been dead for hundreds of years, you are still you, and you still have your consciousness. Maybe I can get you out of the flesh, but you can still survive, and out of the limits of the human body, it will make you go farther in kendo. The one who killed you should be the Gorosei, 5 elders who held a generation of ghosts. If you want revenge, then just follow me. Join my pirate group. Chapter 147 Departure for the next stop. Zhang Yang and others have returned to the motto of the Ark in midair, and Enel, under the coercion and temptation of Zhang Yang, of course completed the task gloriously, and finally killed Gecko Moria with a lot of energy, turning it into a lifeless piece of coke left behind in the forest. On Brook's side, the drawn shadow has also returned to his body, but Zhang Yang didn't deliberately leave Brook in Devil's Delta to let him wait for Luffy's arrival. After all, since he has recovered his shadow, he can go to live in the sun and let Brook stay in a place where the sun is not seen all day long. Zhang Yang said mysteriously, "Xiao Ai, are you sure about a task that only gods can accomplish?" "I am a god, and there is nothing that gods can't do." Enel looked confident and said, "Boss, what are you talking about? Come on, have you seen this huge pirate ship that looks like an island? You can destroy it in whatever way you want, okay?" Zhang Yang led Enel to the side of the boat and pointed to the huge, outrageous boat floating on the sea below. "If you didn't look carefully, you might mistake it for a pirate boat on an island. It's a piece of cake for God." But having said that, Enel nibbled at the apple and stood beside the boat in a tangled state, looking at the huge pirate ship below, wondering what he was thinking. Seeing that Enel stayed by the boat and didn't do anything, Zhang Yang was taken aback, walked over and knocked on Enel's forehead, took the apple from his hand, and cursed, "If you bombard the boat, you will eat apples here, for how long? We haven't eaten enough yet, don't hurry up, we have to hurry to Alabasta." Quote. Just when Zhang Yang knocked on Enel's forehead, there was an electric light directly on his forehead, which obviously relieved the pain, and then took out an apple and took a bite, innocently said, "But I don't know whether to use Wanlei or Lei Ying." Quote. "Which one can sink the island all at once? Be quick, we have to go to the next place." Then Ray welcomes it. Enel lifted the God King to a high altitude, and the 200 million volt Thor transformed himself into a thunder-filled Thor, and began to supply power to the God King. At this moment, a group of thunderclouds rose from the exhaust port above the God King, and when they filled the sky, a large-scale thundercloud appeared, and then Enel released his own thunder and lightning, which stimulated the thundercloud to become dark and dark. Huge spherical thunderbolt. Thor Lei Ying. A huge black ball of thunder and lightning descended slowly from the sky towards the pirate ship that floated on the sea like an island. Enel raised his hands and said with a pretentious smile, "Enjoy the bath from God." On the island, the genius doctor and the zombies watched the thunderball slowly descending from the sky. Their heads couldn't react for a while. Enel's voice came from the sky towards them. "Earth returns to Earth, people return to people, gods return to gods. Each has a place to go. I am just God's arrangement for nature, just obeying the laws of nature." The genius doctor was stunned for a moment, and he yelled, "Damn it, run." Before he finished speaking, the pitch-black thunderball slammed into the island, and a huge roar suddenly came out. The black ball seemed to decompose directly into a sea of thunder at this moment, and in the dusk, it appeared on the lonely sea. Extremely dazzling. "It looks like a tailed beast jade," Zhang Yang murmured, and then walked to the deck, where he saw Hawkeye leaning against the boat, and an illusory figure sitting cross-legged on the ground, as if there was no body, and this figure was naturally a swordsman. The cut shadow returned to Zhang Yang after Ryoma's zombie body was burned. As for why Ryoma did not die, but instead survived with the same spiritual body as Zhang Yang, the time goes back to the time when Ryoma was entangled in zombie fire. At that time, Jongyang used the same death skill as the resurrection of Voss. It's true that he is the world's first great swordsman with a swordsman sentiment. However, what surprised Jongyang was that Ryoma's will, or the strength of the swordsman's will, actually allowed Ryoma to gather spiritual bodies within half an hour, and it was not in that thin state. Ryoma, are you really the greatest swordsman in the world hundreds of years ago? This was not mentioned in the original book. In doubt, Jongyang asked Ryoma curiously, and when he heard Jongyang's question, Hawkeye also turned his attention. What is the number one in the world? It's just on the surface. As for the secrets, there are still stronger than me, such as the one who killed me with a generation of ghosts, your people called Gorosei, 5 elders. Ryoma's expression was a little down. Why did the Gorosei, 5 elders want to kill you? Jongyang asked with a solemn expression. Wano-kuni was a big country at that time. I was the number one expert in Wano-kuni, and I was the captain of the Royal Guard. I was directly under the command of Your Excellency the General. They wanted us to join the establishment of a world government, but we refused, so we started a war. I was still here, and the situation was a little better, but after that, the guy holding a generation of ghosts, your name is Gorosei, 5 elders, appeared and shot me, and I won't know what happened after that. Perhaps it was because of the swordsman that Longma spoke concisely, but Jongyang understood it anyway. Basically, Longma died for his country, 800 years ago. I can't remember, I don't even know what time it is now, I remember the C-circle calendar at that time. After Jongyang listened to it, he forgot about it, the time was just right, it was almost 100 years in the blank, and he had a general understanding. Jongyang didn't think much about it and asked, the Gorosei, 5 elders at that time were very strong. Is there a difference between winning and losing with a knife? Although it is strong, it is not strong enough to be invincible. As for the sword, the difference is not very big. The generation of ghosts that the other party is holding is one of the supreme quick swords, but my Chushui death is only a big quick sword. But it is a national treasure of Wano-kuni, and in terms of craftsmanship, it is already very close to the supreme sword. Quote. Karusen, prepare to release the news, the content is probably that the god of death killed Gecko Moria. Chapter 148 Bounty Increase. The big pirate with a bounty of 340 million, and now Gecko Moria, one of the king's Shichibukai, was killed by a pirate named Reaper. Not only that, but also the strongest fruit of Logia, Guro no Mi, Rumble fruit, Enel, the god of Sky Island, directly sunk Gecko Moria's huge pirate ship like an island with one move. I don't know where this news came from, but once it came out, it quickly set off a new wave in the world. For a time, everyone was madly trying to find out who this person named Death was, and more attention was paid to Enel. The point is placed on the title of the strongest fruit and the god of Sky Island. The god of death first appeared in Logatown with Mahawk, the world's largest swordsman, and attacked Captain Marine, who was in charge of Logatown, and destroyed the execution platform of Roger, who executed Brother One Piece, King of Pirates. Then there is no news, the bounty is 5 million Bailey. Gecko Moria is not a weak character. There was a battle with Kaido of the Beasts in the New World. Although he was defeated, he was completely out. How could he be killed by such an unknown pirate who offered a reward of only 5 million Baileys? Logia's strongest fruit. Is it really Guro no Mi, Rumble fruit? Speaking of which, I thought that Sky Island was really a rumored island. According to rumors, the residents of Sky Island have white wings and the ground is covered with clouds. If this Enel really came from Sky Island, right? Also has a pair of white wings. Why do you want to kill, now King Shichibukai's Gecko Moria? Is this a provocation with the world government and marine? You said, what is the relationship between Hawkeye and this god of death? As far as I know, Hawkeye is not a pirate and often interacts alone. At most, it is to learn swordsmanship with the red-haired Shanks, and it should not be a group with the god of death. Go. If it was really killed by the death god, the 5 million Baileys would be too inaccurate. I don't know if it will increase to 300 million Baileys directly after this incident, or be directly absorbed by the world government and become the king. A member of Shichibukai. This news is not only spread among the people, but even in the New World, it has become a focus topic. Not only Whitebeard, but even redheads, Kaido of the Beasts, Charlotte Limlin and a series of pirates standing at the top of the world are paying attention. This matter. And Logia's strongest fruit, Guro Guro no Mi, Rumble Rumble Fruit, also caught their attention. At their level, it is natural to know that the title of the strongest fruit is not false, and the real existence of Sky Island is not false. But compared to these, they pay more attention to the person Death God. At this time in the Marineford Marshal's office, there were only 5 people, the new Marshal Sengoku, Admiral Zephyr, Kuzan, Kizaru and the General Staff Vice Admiral Crane. You've all heard about this, and now there's a lot of discussion. Sengoku's face was solemn. He put down the newspaper in his hand, and said, "Let's talk about your opinions. If this matter is not handled well, it will not only be a shame for the world government, but also our marine. I think it's unlikely that this pirate called Death killed Gecko Moria. After all, the 340 million big pirate, although not only relying on his strength to fight against Kaido, but he was able to get out of his body, and his strength is not necessary," said. Crane continued, "I personally feel that it should be a joint kill. Doesn't it mean that he has also come closer recently, or Enel, the god of Sky Island? Hawkeye is cold and arrogant. According to our current investigation, he only interacts closely with Red Hair, and it is unlikely that he will help him kill Gecko Moria. Moreover, these two are Shichibukai under the king, and there is no relationship between interests. As for conflicts even more impossible." Quote. Zephyr frowned and said slowly, "After all, that man with eagle eyes, Gecko Moria knows his strength, so the biggest possibility is to join forces with this Enel to kill Gecko Moria. Oh, it's not easy to do this." Kizaru sat lazily on the sofa with Erlang's legs crossed. "After all, I killed the King Shichibukai, so just because he killed Gecko Moria, we should also absorb him into the next King Shichibukai. Wouldn't this make the public feel that our marine is incompetent?" Kuzan took a sip of hot tea and said, "Of course it is impossible to absorb him, so how much should the bounty be raised? It is impossible to jump to the same bounty as Gecko Moria because of this incident, and also consider the bounty of the Sky Island god Enel." Quote. Sengoku's face was solemn. He just took office when this happened. It was just a bad luck, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable. "We don't know his specific strength yet. I think the reward should be temporarily increased to 100 million Bailey. After all, the situation is still serious enough to make us be more vigilant." The Crane staff paused and said, "And Enel. Although it is rumored that he has the strongest Logia fruit, Guro Guro no Mi, Rumble Rumble Fruit, the accuracy has yet to be verified, 7,505 Bailey." Kuzan asked, "Are they whereabouts?" "Not yet." Sengoku shook his head and continued, "If the whereabouts are found, the headquarters will directly dispatch Admiral to arrest him. Although this incident has aroused public opinion in the world, if the public can execute him, then after all, it can raise my marine's military prestige." Quote. "I will explain this matter as soon as possible." Kizaru said, "And what about the photo on Enel's wanted list? Since it is the god of Sky Island, it has white wings after all, but I am afraid that we will be misunderstood, so I will not add any photos for the time being. If it is described, it is a person with the ability of Guro Guro no Mi, Rumble Rumble Fruit." Officer Crane said to Sengoku, "Marshal, what do you think?" "Okay, it's decided like this. As for Shichibukai to be established as soon as possible, find someone to replace Gecko Moria's vacant position. Recently, the situation in the New World has become more and more serious. I heard the wind, and the pirates seem to want to establish a force." Quote. Sengoku stood up and looked at the people below with a solemn expression. At the same time, the pace of recruiting soldiers in the world should speed up. "Zephyr, you've always been in charge of recruiting in the world, pay more attention to that man named Byakuya Kuchiki. Chapter 149 Princess Vivi. The bounty of the god of death jumped directly from 5 million Baileys to 100 million Baileys, and the first bounty of the Sky Island god Enel was 7,555 Baileys. Unprecedented, attracted everyone's attention. Of course, news spreads very fast, not to mention such important news, so the next day, Zhang Yang got the newspaper that fell from the sky. 100 million Bailey, why is it only low? Zhang Yang complained a little, he is the man who killed Akainu, is he worth the price, and Enel has been living in Sky Island, and he is a fool, so he has never heard of Bailey, but after Zhang Yang said the exchange rate, Enel's eyes all have stars. 1 Bailey's currency corresponding to your Sky Island is 10,000 x tall. 100,000 Bailey is 1 billion, 7,550 is. How many billions is this? I am not only a god, but also a rich man. Enel's words made Carlson roll his eyes, looked at Hawkeye, and whispered, Boss Hawkeye, is he really mentally retarded? Hawkeye nodded, turned around and looked at the scenery under the boat, while Carlson looked at Enel, who was a Fortune fan, and thought to himself, if this kind of person is a god, then the world is a world of mental retardation controlled by mental retardation. Mental retardation is a kind of disease that is contagious, keep a distance from him. Since that day, Ryoma has been meditating, cultivating spiritual power, so Zhang Yang can't help but sigh, it really is a problem of aptitude. Voss has not moved for so long, but Ryoma actually completed in one go, not only has a spiritual body, but also spiritual power. Look, boss, here we are. Another day or so has passed. When the hot weather hit, the air was filled with the smell of wind and sand. Carlson's voice made everyone open their eyes. Zhang Yang stood up, walked to the side of the boat, and looked at the sky. The next piece of yellow sand, a smile evoked the corner of his mouth. Alabasta is here. Hawkeye, just stay on the boat. It's not good for you to get too close to me, and it's not good for the world government to be suspicious. Xiao Ai will go with me. Zhang Yang said, and then jumped directly from the air with the reluctant Enel. At this time, Alabasta is also the same as in the original book. It is a desert that cannot see the edge, but the difference is that there are rivers here, and the air is not full of dry sand and dust, and there is a faint trace of it. Arrived moist. Report Captain Kosha that the first, second, third and fourth teams have covered up their tracks, please give instructions. Finished. On the outskirts of the town of Alabasta, in a desert with no human obstacles, a girl with blue hair and a cute face, about 8 years old, was holding a phone bug in one hand, and she was talking softly to the other side. In the other hand, he held a long branch with a black cloth with the words rustling on it, like a flag. When it was raised high, the girl slammed it down. And behind her were 8 children, all of them boys, all of them holding a branch with the thickness of a finger and falling to the ground with the girl's voice. They all lay down in the desert, motionless. There is no obstacle ahead, Deputy Head of Vivi, move on. It's over. In the desert about 30 or 40 meters in front of this girl named Vivi, there is a dark tea-green short shattered hair, with the 10-year-old boy with brown glasses was also holding a phone bug and slowly opened his mouth to the other side. He was wearing a long red-brown trench coat, a dark green belt, orange gloves, and a super long sword on his back. He is the head of this so-called Shasha group, and Kosha is also the head of a child. Vivi got it done. Vivi climbed up from the desert, waved the flag in his hand, and commanded softly, each team has an orderly going. With the same voice, the other 8 boys lying in the desert stood up together, 2 by 2, and leaned forward. As time passed, the sun in the sky became more and more sinister, and the warmth reached a new climax in the desert. The children below were sweating profusely. But what they didn't find was that there were several figures not far behind them, and the most notable of them was a tall woman with peculiar curly hair. At this moment, everyone was talking in a low voice. Hey, Princess Vivi, how did they run so far this time? The sun is really poisonous today, it's killing me. Tiragotten Foreman, Princess Vivi will become an excellent conductor in the future. Yeah, you see now, at such a young age, Princess Vivi's talent has already begun to emerge. It's all children's games. At this moment, Kosha was standing beside a stream, and Vivi and the others were only a few dozen meters away from him, but at this moment, a mutation protruded. It popped up and appeared, as if it had been hiding there. Ajaro. Everyone was stunned when they saw this figure, and their expressions suddenly became flustered. Vivi knew this man. This is a small gangster who lives without a fixed place. He has been doing business of kidnapping people for ransom, and he is a notorious person. Hearing the panic sound of Vivi and the others, Kosha turned around immediately, and when he saw the figure with the long sword in front of him, his expression changed. He drew the long sword from behind, and shouted, "Yajaluo, what do you want to do?" Quote. Of course it was the kidnapping of Princess Vivi, and the king was asked to get the ransom, but after all, it was Princess Alabasta, and the ransom was never planned. Yajaruo charged directly towards Vivi, seeing that he was about to meet Vivi in the next second. Kosha had bad eyes, and when he rushed forward, he slashed towards Yajaruo. In the nick of time, Yajaluo avoided the knife sideways, and slashed directly at Kosha's left eye with a backhand. In an instant, blood flowed. Kosha let out a scream, covered his left eye, and his figure staggered. Princess Vivi, how much do you think you are worth? Yajaluo had already put the knife on Vivi's neck, but in an instant, a voice suddenly came from the air, Rice Wife. Chapter 150, Booming Mountain and Now Pluto. After jumping off the Arc Proverbs, Zhongyang noticed in midair that Vivi, who looked like a child on the ground, was in danger, so he let Enel put a lightning beam to directly kill the gangster with the knife, and then did not show up, and Enel speeding all the way towards a big mountain in Alabasta. In the depths of Alabasta, there are many mountains, which are extremely magnificent, while Zhongyang and Enel stayed in midair at the mountainside and stood suspended. What are we doing here? Enel looked around, except for the bare mountains. Looking up was blue sky and white clouds, and looking down was a bird's eye view of Alabasta. Pluto, one of the three ancient weapons, is here. A strange light flashed in Zhongyang's eyes, and when the hoarse voice came out, Enel was stunned. Pluto is a giant ship, but there are only mountains here. Where are their ships? Have you made a mistake? Wait, what do you mean? Pluto is sleeping in this mountain. Enel came back to his senses, showing an incredible look, and said dumbfounded. You're smart this time. Zhongyang Vivi Isho, the armament spiritual pressure attached to the fists, and a wave of transparent air was entangled, and the body was galloping toward the mountain, and suddenly said, double bones. Today's Zhongyang has recovered 80% of his strength. Captain Yamamoto's strongest stunt double bone is already powerful, but now with the gathering of armament, spiritual pressure, its power is self-evident. In an instant, Zhongyang's figure had come to the front of the mountain, and when his fists were raised between his waist and suddenly slammed on the mountainside, the whole mountain was shaken for a while, and a slight crack appeared. The two bones fell, and they didn't give up. Punch after punch, bone after bone, constantly banging on the mountainside, the roar continued, and cracks suddenly appeared from the mountain. Alabasta is still the same as in the past. The people live a peaceful life. King Cobra is correcting documents, but at that moment, when the ground shakes, Cobra was stunned. He thought it was an illusion, but then one after another as the roar spread, the ground trembled more and more intensely. Countless decorations, books on the shelves and other placed items are constantly falling to the ground. Ekulem, what happened? Is it an earthquake? Cobra shouted, and Ekulem with strange curly hair immediately ran in from the door. Your Majesty, the roar, the vibration, I don't know the cause, I have sent the palace guards to investigate. What's the matter? Is there an earthquake? If there is a sandstorm, it will be miserable. What should I do? I don't want to die yet. In fact, the market felt the strongest earthquake. Because of the shaking of the ground, the roar from all directions shook people's heartstrings like ripples, making people panic. Get out of the way, blockers, kill. The entire Alabasta panicked at this moment, and when the palace guards rushed out of the dragon palace with their spears, an officer figure ran forward and shouted. After the threat of the guards came out, the crowds in the market were blocked, and at this moment a path was forced out of the middle, allowing the palace guards to pass. How is it possible? When the palace guards relied on the shock to endure and came to the edge of Alabasta, there was a loud noise stronger than all the previous rumblings combined, and the guards looked incredible. Boom! They were all dumbfounded as they watched the tall mountain in front of them die from the mountainside at this moment, and was smashed into the sea level. It also fell to the ground, and part of it fell asleep on the bottom of the sea. Look, is there a dark ship in the mountains? As the mountain was shattered, at this moment, not only the guards present, but even the people of the market, including Cobra, who was paying attention to this side from the window of the palace, was shocked at this moment, even from a distance. It was shockingly, the boat is so big. No wonder it needs to be hidden in the mountains. This ship is even bigger than Gecko Moria's island-like ships. It is an island warship. A hoarse laughter came from the side of the dark battleship, and when it fell into the ears of the guards around, it surprised them. The guards with sharp eyes finally found a black-robed figure standing beside the battleship. Surrounded. The officer gave an order, and in an instant, all the guards came back to their senses, raised their weapons and surrounded the black-robed figure. Clear face. Not only that, but there was a burning aura emanating from the body of the black-robed figure, causing the guards to sweat profusely and their breaths began to rush. Who are you? Let's capture it, or don't blame us for being ruthless. The officer shouted loudly, frowning when he saw that the figure in black robe did not respond. Do it. The voice fell, and the surrounding guards came at this moment with long spears and shot directly at the black-robed figure, with the intention of stabbing him to death. I count 3 times, and after 3 seconds, if I can see that there are still people here. The figure in black robe is naturally Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang's bloody eyes flashed, and he said coldly, there is only one death. Zhang Yang's voice was mixed with spiritual pressure. When it came out, all the guards were shocked and stopped, swallowing saliva involuntarily, hesitating. 3. Zhang Yang fell down, and a large sword with the handle of Dongfang Shozi appeared in his hand. Sir, what should I do? Just pretend, don't be frightened, I'll go first. The officer snorted coldly, pulled out his long knife, and rushed directly towards Zhang Yang, and at the same time, too. Also sounded, Zhang Yang muttered at the corners of his mouth, and the flowing blade in his hand suddenly rose with a manic rage. Flame. Lu Ren Ruahuo had already completed Shikai quickly, and even Zhang Yang didn't do anything. The moment the officer approached Zhang Yang's body, flames burst out from his body, and accompanied by screams, he was directly burned to ashes. Chapter 151 Surrender, or Die. The last chapter has been revised again, and the plot is completely different. Readers can read it again. Because it is a revision, not a reissue, readers who have already subscribed do not have to worry about losing VIP points, because they are not satisfied with the plot they wrote. This is compensation for all readers, and the subsequent plot will be cool to the end and directly enter the climax. Dividing line. When the guards present saw that the officer had just come to each other's side, flames ignited inexplicably all over their bodies, and they were directly burned to ashes. Taking a few steps, when he looked at the black-robed figure in front of him, the fear in his eyes took over all. 3. A murmur like the sound of death sounded in an instant, and the guard's psychological defense line was quickly disintegrated like a wind and a cloud. I said it 3 times, if there is still someone in front of me, I can only die. When Zhang Yang's voice fell, a cold and lifeless invisible wind blew directly on the guards who were walking away. When their figures froze, Zhang Yang slammed his hand forward like a fire. The flame's big hand instantly suppressed the guards one by one. Burn the city on fire. Because Zhang Yang didn't remind him, he couldn't break through from the inside, so the next time, in the flames, screams continued to sound, until a certain moment, the surroundings fell into silence, only the sound of the sea breeze blowing. This shocking flame was so prominent that everyone could see it, and at the high-rise window of the palace, Cobra saw this scene very clearly, and said to Ecolem next to him with a gloomy expression, "Have you made your investigation clear?" This. Ecolem's expression became embarrassed, and he said nervously, "Your Majesty, the communication is completely cut off, and there is no news about the guards sent out for the time being." Trash. Cobra cursed, and walked quickly towards the outside, while speaking to Ecolem coldly, "We still don't know who the enemy is or how many there are. Order all the guards to assemble while maintaining order and evacuate the people. On the one hand, to protect the safety of the people. In addition, 30% of the king's army was mobilized and rushed to the palace immediately, and 20% of the army was ready. If the situation was critical, they would come to support as quickly as possible. The remaining 50% the king's army, unless the situation has reached an uncontrollable level, must not leave the post without authorization. Remember that this is a trick to move the tiger away from the mountain." "Yes." Ecolem nodded with a serious look, and without the slightest hesitation, he immediately took out the phone bug and gave an order over there. Under the protection of the two patron saints of Alabasta, Bel the Eagle and Gaka the Jackal, Cobra came to the balcony where the palace usually announces important events. Looking at the dark and chaotic crowd below, Cobra took out a loudspeaker and said with a gloomy expression, "People of Alabasta, don't panic, although we don't know who the enemy is or what his reasons are. But we Alabasta's strength, everyone knows, remember not to mess around. We have a 30W King's army. Before this force, we don't need to be afraid at all. We still have millions of people, we are still members of the world government, and we have the capital to not be afraid of any evil forces." Cobra's voice was like a rainbow, and the voices stirred the minds of the crowd, and the momentum that had been beaten was restored again. At this time, the guards rushed out of the palace and began to evacuate the people and maintain traffic. Of fluency. Look at the sky. I don't know who raised the head first to hear the sound, but once it came out, everyone's eyes were on the pitch-black behemoth in the sky. This looks like a battleship. With the movement of the huge battleship in the sky, it also blocked the sky, causing the people below to fall into the shadows. The momentum that was finally built up under Cobra's words, at this moment, faintly showed signs of collapse. Look under the battleship. This black-robed shadow, is this a person? This is how much strength it takes to hold up this huge warship with one hand. Zhang Yang dragged Pluto with one hand, wandering in the air, and finally stopped on the palace grounds. During the spiritual pressure blessing, a hoarse voice spread out, shrouded in the hearts of the masses like the shadow of death, "Submit, or die." Even Cobra trembled when he saw the figure holding the giant ship in his hand, but at this time, the 10W King's army, wearing armor and holding weapons, rushed to the palace from all directions at this moment, armed with guns. Hidden in every corner, the black hole aligns with the figure in the sky. Seeing the arrival of the 10W Royal Army, Cobra was also shocked and regained his confidence. "I advise you not to make senseless resistance. Alabasta is a member of the world government, and our royal family was the second world government at that time. Descendants of 10 royal families, strictly speaking, we are the most noble Tenryubito in the world. If you dare to make a move today, even if one soldier is injured, the world government and marine will not let you go. When the time comes, the 3 admirals will attack you. Do you think you still have a chance to survive?" Zhang Yang Vivi Isho, the hoarse voice spread immediately. "I know such threats are true, but, you are wrong. I'm not afraid of 3 admiral." Cobra's face froze. He had no choice but to meet someone who was not afraid of death. Before Zhang Yang finished speaking, he paused and said, "So, Your Majesty the King, you chose to die, right?" Although Zhang Yang asked such a question, Cobra had no way to answer. Did he answer dead or not? Stop joking. At this moment, he could only be silent in cold sweat. Dare to start. Bet he is afraid of retaliation from the world government and marine. It seems that His Majesty the King still doesn't believe it. If you remain silent, I will take your death by default. Die with your subjects. Zhang Yang snorted coldly, the corners of his mouth began to murmur, as if he were singing, and at the same time, a red light suddenly appeared in Zhang Yang's empty right hand, and with the increase of energy, the size of his red light was also increasing. With a few breaths, Zhang Yang's strongest ghostly waves suddenly gathered, and the huge fluctuations of power gathered in the sky above Alabasta, and the huge red light was like the sun, shocking the mind. Chapter 152, All Surrender. Looking around, the pupils are already occupied by the blood-red sun. And the terrifying energy fluctuations in the bright sun are even more contained in it, as if it has been hiding, waiting for the moment to explode. You said, if this shot goes down, will the entire Alabasta be bombed into the bottom of the sea, and there will be no country or island from now on. When Zhang Yang's hoarse voice came out, all Alabasta's subjects, even the army soldiers, had intensified fear in their eyes, and they trembled when they looked at the figure that looked like a god of death. I surrender, I surrender. Just when the energy fluctuations stopped increasing, as if it were about to explode, Cobra finally failed to overcome his fear of death. For a moment, his body seemed to lose his strength and collapsed directly to the ground. Behind him, Gaka and Bell both helped Cobra up immediately, with a complicated look. Your Majesty, my king, now you know your surrender. The sarcastic Isho said in a cold voice, it's too late. Broken the road, 91,000 hands, the sky and the cannon. Zhang Yang stretched out his hand and waved, and the feeling of death coming made some people close their eyes in fear. At the same time, some people were silent in despair, and some people complained that I didn't want to die before they died. Zhang Yang's cannon didn't hit the bottom of his feet, but instead hit the sea. When a monstrous sound rang out, the entire Alabasta shook violently, and a shocking giant crater appeared on the sea. Bottomless like an abyss. At the same time, because of the strong and powerful energy that erupted at the sea level, a level 8 tsunami was set off. One after another huge waves, one after another vortex suddenly formed, the sea water danced like flying demons, and the group of heroes competed for hegemony, making the whole sea a hideous face, full of scorpions, and roaring into the sky. In the ark's proverb in midair, Carlson and Enel, Ryoma and Hawkeye are all standing by the side of the boat, watching the sea level that is constantly tearing and fighting, and the shocking abyss pit in it. This is only 80% of the boss's strength. Callison stared blankly at the dynamic bird's eye view in midair, swallowed, and the shock in his expression was indescribable. This is already comparable to the terrifying power of the father's shock fruit. Boss, will it be the second old man, the second strongest man in the world? I can't imagine how strong he would be in his prime if the boss regained his full strength. Although Ryoma was silent, Hawkeye was silent, and Enel was silent, but Callison's words at the moment were all their thoughts at the moment, and even at this moment, a strong fighting spirit erupted from them, which was a kind of chasing after the strong. Obsession. Perhaps, overthrowing the world government, if it is this man, he can definitely do it. The scene of destroying the sky and destroying the earth shocked the king, including all his subjects, soldiers, etc., but at the same time, a heart that was raised was suddenly put down. It's okay not to die. When a feeling of powerlessness pervaded everyone in Alabasta, when they looked at the figure holding the battleship like a god of death, the figures all knelt down, and the blackness was overwhelming, as if surrendering to Zhang Yang's feet. The publicity at this moment is like the king of the world. Although Zhang Yang stepped on the void, his face full of black mist was terrifying and cold, but at this moment, Zhang Yang was secretly overjoyed. I used to read novels, and when I saw the protagonist pretending to conquer, I felt relieved, but I didn't expect myself to be the protagonist. Immersive, even more cool. Quote. Didn't that immortal Gorosei, 5 elders kill me at that time? Damn, wait for one day. I won't respect the old man anymore, just beat you to the ground and force you 5 immortals to kneel down for me. When the world government is overthrown, the feeling of refreshment in the future will be even greater than today. Speaking of which, it's tiring to pretend to be forceful. Why is this ghost underworld so heavy? It's exhausting me, my lord. When everyone surrendered, Zhang Yang first let Enel and Callison accept everything about the palace. Then, without stopping, it broke out at full speed, and the figure galloped, ready to quickly put Pluto on the calmer sea around him. But at this moment, the changes occurred one after another, and a cloud of sand appeared behind Zhang Yang. The next moment, the mass of sand turned into a figure, and the golden hook on the left hand shone with a gleam of evil light, stabbing directly at Zhang Yang from behind. However, the golden hook passed directly through Zhang Yang's body. The figure was startled. Zhang Yang turned his head and laughed hoarsely. "Crocodile, a sneak attack is not good." After the words fell, Zhang Yang slammed the Pluto battleship into Crocodile with both hands. Even if he wanted to say elemental words, Zhang Yang moved so fast that even he did not respond immediately. Boom! The body suffered a strong impact, and Kuro Kurta's figure directly turned into a black shadow and smashed into the desert from midair. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and before he could recover, a shadow suddenly shrouded his figure. Zhang Yang, carrying the pitch-black ship, smashed it towards Crocodile again. This blow, he still did not dodging, spitting out blood. Crocodile watched in shock as Zhang Yang lifted the giant ship again, wanting to continue. Desert Sunflower. When there was a hint of fear in his eyes, the desert under him trembled directly, forming a vortex. Crocodile did not hesitate, and at this moment, he directly elementalized, and got into the desert vortex. No figure, obviously preparing to escape. He was really scared. This man is a lunatic. If he doesn't run away, he will be smashed to death. I still want to run away in front of me. Zhang Yang snorted coldly and threw Pluto directly on the sea level, setting off a huge wave. Zhang Yang directly took out the flowing blade, and muttered at the corner of his mouth, "Everything in the mountains, all turned into ashes." Blade like fire. Shikai. A powerful and hot flame erupted from Lu Ren Ruo Huo Dao, and in the turbulent rise, Zhang Yang's voice slowly spread. "This is the first time I have used this move. Even if you die, you should be honored." Burning Hell. Chapter 153 Crocodile Surrender. Burning Hell. Zhang Yang mentioned the flowing blade with a wave of fire, and a violent flame eroded towards the desert in an instant, turning into a sea of fire in an instant. But it was not over yet, dozens of pillars of fire bursting into the sky at this moment. It fell from the sky and smashed into the desert in the sea of fire. When a huge roar was emitted, the entire desert shook violently. The high temperature that was even more terrifying than a volcanic eruption seemed to burn everything up. Submit, or die. Because the violent flames have eroded the interior of the desert, the scorching high temperature, even the sand can't help but emit white steam. And Crocodile, who was hiding in the desert and was fleeing, even if the elements turned into sand, his whole body was on fire. If he was on the verge of death, the crisis of death forced him to appear in the desert. The terrifying flames on his body continued to burn, making Crocodile's face distorted. When he looked at the dozens of fire pillars around his body, his eyes were full of horror. "I admit that my skills are not as good as others, but I, Crocodile, will not surrender to others. You give me a treat, kill me, at least leave a whole body." Crocodile's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth. "Since you asked for death, then I will give you a face. Remember, the person who killed you is called Zhang Yang. If there is a chance, then take revenge in the next life, but I don't think we will see each other in the next life." After saying that, Zhang Yang didn't care about Crocodile's request before he died, and was about to detonate dozens of fire pillars in the sea of fire, but Crocodile blurted out in surprise, "Zhang Yang. Is that the righteous messenger? Marine future. The Marshal's successor Zhang Yang. Didn't you get killed by Whitebeard? You talk too much nonsense. Let's go to hell and ask this question again." Zhang Yang snorted coldly, and even at this moment Crocodile felt the terrifying breath of the fire column expanding and poised to explode, and he hurriedly shouted, "Wait, I surrender. I surrender. Stop these damn fire columns first." Quote, "I surrender to you, but you must build a force to defeat Whitebeard. I have only one purpose, to kill Whitebeard." Crocodile raised his eyelids, his eyes staring at Zhang Yang. My goal is to overthrow the world government. What do you say? Zhang Yang's mind moved. The flames on the Ruo Ren Ruo fire suddenly disappeared, and when Shikai was released, the dozens of giant pillars that reached the sky also slowly disappeared at this moment. Only the terrifying high temperature around can confirm that all this happened. I hope you didn't lie to me. Crocodile said weakly. He fainted directly on the ground, not hearing the second half of Zhang Yang's sentence. But I just lied to you. Zhang Yang Isho put Crocodile on his shoulders, and came to the palace in a few moments. If Zhang Yang can be described as the king of Alabasta, whoever dares not obey an order, call a doctor directly to treat Crocodile. When returning to Arc Proverbs, Ryoma looked at Zhang Yang and asked, why are you so anxious to reveal your strength? My strength is almost fully restored, and after 3 days, we are in a riot at Impel Down. Zhang Yang was high-spirited, his voice was full of hockey, and he continued, the strong are respected in the pirate world, but reputation is the best way to show strength. If I want to subdue the evil thieves in Impel Down, I have to make them believe me. How to convince? Only strong strength. So, now is just the beginning. Next first will attract Marine 3 Admiral, Deterrence. And I will also do a live broadcast, so that the world can see my strength. Quote. Ryoma frowned slightly. Aren't you afraid? The Gorosei 5 elders you call with the first generation of ghosts are coming to trouble you. What's there to be afraid of? I've already been killed by them once. You haven't heard a word. The longer you live, the more suspicious you become, the more cautious you become, the more afraid of death. Gorosei 5 elders won't take action without knowing my strength and identity. At least before the Impel Down incident, I don't need to worry about that. Zhang Yang Isho, looking at Hawkeye and Ryoma, and after coming out of Impel Down, I will have more strength than now, at least 10 times, and then it will be time for us to overthrow the world government. The lowest level of Impel Down, if I guess correctly, the Golden Lion is still there, and the World Destroyer Burndi World is also there. These two men are both standing at the pinnacle of pirates, and are feared by the world government and marine. And this time, I'm going to let the two of them aboard my ship, and they should be very interested in overthrowing the world government. Alabasta spread to all corners of the world in a very short period of time, causing a sensation no less than a magnitude 9 earthquake. No matter who or what force, they are all paying attention here. Alabasta is a very special country. It is not only a member of the world government, but its royal family is the descendant of one of the 20 royal families who founded the world government at that time. It is a real Tenryubito noble, but now it has made a pirate leader. A nest end, this is completely naked fan the old face of the world government. Tenryubito was frightened and angry, and the world government was not angry. Gorosei 5 elders directly connected to the Marine Headquarters Marshal's office, and gave orders in a bad tone. The atmosphere in Marineford today is extremely depressing, especially in the conference room of the Marine Headquarters. All the people who are qualified to participate in this meeting are above Vice Admiral. All looked dignified, as if facing an enemy. I just finished a fairy tale with the Holy Land Maria Gorosei 5 elders 10 minutes ago. Sengoku frowned, and the next moment his fist fell directly on the table. There was a loud noise, and he said angrily, the current tense is so serious that it can't help but make all the member countries of the world government feel a sense of crisis, even the people of the world. They all questioned our marine. Quote. Such a big thing happened, and there was no news about it beforehand. Pluto, one of the 3 ancient weapons, was found by him. What the hell do we marine do for food? Chapter 154 Kuchiki Byakuya. Oh, this incident probably really made the Gorosei 5 elders angry. Kizaru raised his eyelids and said in a fast-paced voice, being able to defeat Crocodile is not weak. Marshal, let me see this god of death this time. Kuzan, you go with Kizaru. After pondering for a moment, Sengoku looked at Kuzan, and seeing Kuzan nodded, Sengoku continued. This time, 6 warships were dispatched, and 4 Vice Admiral were dispatched to go with Kuzan Kizaru. This time, the matter must be taken seriously. Quote. If you can catch it alive, you can catch it alive. This time the situation is serious, and it must be publicly executed. This is the meaning of the world government. Sengoku finished speaking. He named 4 vice admirals' names and continued. In addition, the bounty of the god of death has been directly increased to 400 million Bailey. If there is nothing else, then let the meeting go, get ready, and leave Alabasta immediately. Zephyr suddenly spoke, and said to Sengoku with a solemn expression, Sengoku, let me go too. The origin of the god of death is unknown, and the situation is serious. I'm afraid it's not safe for the 2 of them to go. Well, you go with them. Marine's actions were quick, and the latest bounty order from the Grim Reaper swept the whole world in a short period of time. The news of 3 admiral and 4 vice admiral, hundreds of marine, and 7 warships set off from Marineford Harbor to Alabasta also leaked. Go out. For a time, the world boiled and shocked again. This lineup is much stronger than Buster Call. Isn't Marine being too serious this time? There should be no need to dispatch so many troops. It's nothing more than relying on this incident to act as a deterrent. First, the bounty was directly increased from 100 million to 400 million, and then with such an unprecedented move, the government and Marine seem to be really provoked this time. Who said no? This pirate called Death God. This is really a big disaster. The limelight is out, but this life is coming to an end. Also, I heard that this god of death is still waiting for Marine's arrival in Alabasta, and he looks like he is not afraid. I think it's because I know it's death. Let's just play with prestige. At this time on the seaside of Alabasta, Zhang Yang had already smelted Hades with hot flames. Looking at a huge steel plate that was melted into a mountain-like steel, Zhang Yang muttered to himself, even if Hades can sink an island with one shot, but I have the Arc motto, and one move can sink an island. Not only that, but the most important point is that Hades is a ship, and my motto is a spaceship. It doesn't matter if this Hades is ruined, don't worry about others. The steel plate is so practical, it can be like swatting flies. Whoever needs a beating will slap to death. Try the power. Zhang Yang took the steel plate smelted by Hades and galloped all the way to the top of the mountains. His hands were wrapped by the armament's spiritual pressure. The next moment, he took the huge dark steel plate and slammed it directly on the top of the mountain. When the ground shook and the mountain shook, the top of the mountain was smashed to pieces by the steel plate. I really don't know what material this is. Could it be that the ancients discovered the mysterious iron outside the sky? Zhang Yang was puzzled, but without any effort. After easily smashing a few hills, he threw the iron brick on the beach, and after people began to arrange cameras in all directions on the beach, he sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes slightly. Began to restore the last 20% of the strength. At this moment, the world's military recruitment is going on smoothly and orderly, and one of them is a dark horse named Kuchiki Byakuya. All the way, he swept other competitors with a tough attitude and destructive strength. The strange thing is that every time he challenges others, he will first ask, do you know the news of Captain Yamamoto? Marineford, the world recruiting officer, Kuchiki Byakuya is wearing the costume of Captain Reaper. His feet are clogs, his collar is inlaid with golden tassels, and a long knife is tied around his waist. News. I don't know. Everyone shook their heads, but their eyes were looking at this figure with some fear, and the candidates who were able to rush here knew that this man named Kuchiki Byakuya was terrifying. Garp Vice Admiral. At this moment, Garp came over. He heard that an interesting guy came out of the world conscription, so he couldn't hold back his interest, ran over, and saw Byakuya Kuchiki, who was clearly dressed. I heard that you were looking for a man named Captain Yamamoto. Yes, have you heard of it? Kuchiki Byakuya was stunned for a moment, and hurriedly asked. He came here from the world of the god of death just to find the traces of Captain Yamamoto, but along the way, he found nothing, and he was very anxious. Boy, tell me the characteristics of this Captain Yamamoto, maybe I can help you find it out. Garp said while eating senbei. Holding a sword that can emit thousands of degrees of high temperature, the handle is Dongfang Shozi, an old man dressed like me, and can release ghost skills out of thin air. Byakuya Kuchiki stretched out his hand, and a shockwave erupted directly from his fingertips. Garp was stunned. You're talking like a person, but not an old man. Who? A major named Zhang Yang, as you said, also has a tactical sword of Dongfang Shozi, and can also emit a high-temperature flame of several thousand degrees, but before opening his mouth, he seems to be chanting a spell or something, and he will also say what you said. Ghost skills. Garp's expression was a little gloomy, and the movement of grabbing the senbei and preparing to put it in his mouth also stopped. Where are the others now? Kuchiki Byakuya frowned. Now that he finally heard some news, he asked anxiously. At this time Sengoku came over. It has been dead for a few months. Dead. Kuchiki Byakuya's face suddenly became ugly, his fists clenched, and he gritted his teeth. Who killed it? Marco, captain of the first team, and Vista, captain of the fifth team, on the Whitebeard. Although Kuchiki Byakuya knew that this person was not the captain of Yamamoto, but since he had the Zanpakuto of the captain, and Shikai, he must be the heir of the old man, and it was reasonable for him to seek revenge. Chapter 155 Long Time No See. Garp, how much do you know about this man? Seeing the figure of Byakuya Kuchiki leaving, Sengoku's expression was a little moved. He could just issue an invitation to make him a quasi-admiral, but what he didn't expect was that the other party refused and asked Whitebeard where they were. Left here without saying anything, and it seemed that he was looking for Whitebeard. He is a good swordsman, and his strength is very strong. When recruiting in the world, he rushed to the end with a tough attitude almost all the way, and as far as I know, Kuzan has played against him before, but... Garp looked solemn. Losing. It's a pity. In short, after this incident is over, it will be our marine's great strength to keep this person as much as possible. Sengoku finished speaking. Garp said, however, as long as he doesn't die at the hands of Whitebeard. 7 menacing warships have now appeared on the Sea of Alabasta. Feeling the powerful and familiar Reiatsu from the sea, Zhang Yang still closed his eyes, but he laughed and murmured, finally here. Are you? At this moment, Zhang Yang's strength has recovered to 90%, and the illusory figure has become more and more solid, and the face of Haiwu now has the outline of his life. When people who are familiar with it see it, the horror can already be recognized. The 7 warships were running side by side, and the 3 in the middle had Kuzan Zephyr and Kizaru standing on the bow respectively. When they were getting closer to Alabasta and saw the dark shadow sitting on the ground, Zephyr suddenly ordered, remove the Admiral's warships were with me, and the rest of the warships surrounded Alabasta from all sides. Vice Admiral and Marine all disembarked on the warship, entered Alabasta, searched for other enemies, and ensured the safety of the people and the royal family. The port where the 3 Admiral warships docked happened to be not far from the place where the black-robed figure sat cross-legged. After disembarking, Zephyr said to the sailors of the 3 warships, we are enough here, you follow the other Vice Admiral into the town. Yes. Nearly 100 Marines heard Zephyr's order, and after a loud roar, they turned into several torrents and dispersed. Oh, isn't this the god of death that shocked the world recently? When he saw the black-robed figure not far in front of him, Kizaru spoke slowly and said lazily, it's hard to compare the recent limelight. Fortunately, you didn't run away, otherwise we would have to work hard. It's okay to have the awareness to do something wrong. Going together, Kuzan also spoke lazily and slowly, but Zephyr remained silent, frowning, and his face was solemn. He faintly felt that the back was a little familiar. Why don't you move? Have you committed suicide out of fear of crime? That's not good. The superior ordered you to be captured alive. If you commit suicide, we won't be able to communicate well. Kizaru walked towards the black-robed figure, raised his hand, and between his fingers, a beam of light suddenly burst out. When he was about to come to the black-robed figure, his figure disappeared directly, and the beam slammed into the front. In the forest, an explosion occurred. Long time no see, it's not good to start as soon as we meet. When a hoarse voice came out from behind the 3 Admiral, the three of them were startled, and they all turned around immediately. Kizaru and Kuzan wanted to say something, but when they saw the face of the black-robed figure in front of them, they even kept going. With drooping eyelids, Kuzan and Kizaru suddenly widened their eyes at this moment, revealing an incredible and very shocked expression. You are. Zephyr's pupils shrank suddenly, and when he looked at the black-robed figure in front of him, the appearance in his impression and the figure in front of him kept overlapping, separating and overlapping. Mr. Zephyr. Zhang Yang is facing Zephyr VV Isho. You are Zhang Yang. Kuzan said in shock. But, aren't you already killed by Whitebeard? You will know about these things later, and it just so happens that I have to make the truth public. Today is a good time. Zhang Yang said in a cold voice. Zhang Yang, I know there's no way to explain what happened before, but go back with me now. I should also retire. After you return to Marine, I will recommend you to become an admiral. Zephyr looked a little complicated and a little guilty, and then said, didn't you always want Marine to have real justice? Become admiral, you can do more. Mr. Zephyr, I had a very happy time in Marine, especially the good times at Marine Academy. Zhang Yang looked a little reminiscent and a little melancholy, and asked after silence, Tina, Bastille, ain't they all okay? They are all very good and have graduated. They were assigned to a place suitable for them to practice. After you left, their training became very hard, especially Tina. Zephyr was silent for a while, then said with a complicated expression, is there no way to come back? Marine is directly under the jurisdiction of the world government after all, and the world government is an untrustworthy place. I have been betrayed and betrayed once, could it be? Zhang Yang shook his head, with a questioning tone and a wry smile, is there a second time? Isn't it enough to die once? What betrayal and betrayal, this is about the world government, isn't it all the work of Whitebeard's captain? Because the Gorosei 5 elders killed Zhang Yang and blamed Whitebeard, only the admiral and the marshal at that time knew about it in Marine, so Kuzan and Kizaru were confused now. Zhang Yang smiled, but the smile was a little weird. It seems that the world government also I don't want this scandal to be revealed. What you want to know, I will tell, but not now. What do you want to do now? Kuzan looked at Zhang Yang and asked with a frown. Justice is often only qualified for the strong, and now I have only one goal. Zhang Yang said with a firm look, and slowly spit out, that is to overthrow the world government. Zephyr was silent, Kizaru was shocked. Zhang Yang continued, this place is already covered with cameras, this battle will be a signal for my return, let's fight. After the war, it will be a wonderful press conference. Chapter 156. 3 Battles Zephyr. We have had 2 discussions before. The first time you lost, and the second time it was basically a draw. I really want to see how far you have reached these days. Kizaru, Kuzan, just let me and this kid have a game. As soon as the words fell, a powerful aura erupted from Zephyr's body. Once it appeared, it quickly spread around like a ripple, and Zhang Yang did not show weakness. The real captain-level spiritual pressure in his body was gone at this moment. Retention spews directly out of the body. Zephyr armament hockey, Zhang Yang also instantly covered armament spiritual pressure, and the 2 figures disappeared on the ground almost at the same time. Clang clang clang. When the sound of the collision spread, Zhang Yang and Zephyr turned into black shadows, constantly flowing in various positions, sparks overflowing between the fists. Rangkyaku, Tempest Kick. As Zephyr kicked out, a blue sword chi roared out instantly. Zhang Yang was not afraid at all, and the corner of his mouth murmured, one bone. His right fist suddenly retracted to his waist. Just as this sword chi came to Zhang Yang in front of him, a punch that seemed to be extremely slow was thrown directly. The powerful impact directly disintegrated the blue blade air, and Zephyr, who was galloping with his fist and figure, collided again, and the strong air wave caused the surrounding ground to collapse rapidly. The strength of these 2 people is extremely terrifying. When the air wave rushed to Kizaru and Kuzan's side, the cloak of justice buzzed behind them. Kizaru said solemnly. But, it is said that Zhang Yang's swordsmanship is the strongest. Kuzan was horrified. Even against Teacher Zephyr, he dares to preserve his strength. How strong is Zhang Yang now? At this moment, Zhang Yang still didn't use the flowing blade. The two turned into black shadows in midair, constantly colliding back and forth. Not only had the ground collapsed in a large area, but there were thousands of caves and holes on it, which was simply overwhelming. Empty cannon. As Zephyr stretched out his hands, a powerful shock wave burst out from his palm, and when a rumbling sound spread, Zephyr's voice sounded instantly. I know your swordsmanship is the strongest, don't let it go. Seeing that I'm an old man now, just show mercy to me. Boy, let me see how far you have grown. When this impact burst towards Zhang Yang, it left a deep trace on the ground. Zhang Yang Isho, with a flick of his right hand, the flowing blade suddenly appeared like fire. The corner of his mouth murmured, Shikai instantly, and a manic flame wrapped around the blade. The air around him became oppressive and hot. If that's the case, then Mr. Zephyr, you should have a good look at my strength. Zhang Yang shouted, holding the flowing blade Ruohuo and slashing forward sharply. A flaming knife gas easily slashed the shock wave directly, and in the blink of an eye came to Zephyr. Zephyr was startled, and his steel-colored arms crossed. He blocked the blow, but even so, his figure was forced by the sword energy and retreated a few meters. Boom! At this moment, a sound of surging flames suddenly appeared in front of Zephyr. When he looked up, he saw Zhang Yang who suddenly appeared in front of him. At this moment, Zhang Yang waved the flowing blade like fire, rolling the flames, from top to bottom, cut towards Zephyr. Be careful, Yada Changuyu. At this moment, Kizaru's lazy voice suddenly sounded, and at the same time, Zhang Yang looked away and saw that Kizaru jumped into the air at this moment. His hands were facing each other, dazzling rays of light shone, and then in the next moment, he even shot towards Zhang Yang. Countless light bomb attacks. Kizaru's face was gloomy. Even if he wanted to help Zhang Yang stop him at this moment, he could only have more than enough power under the circumstances of Zhang Yang's rapid offensive. I guessed you wouldn't be obedient. Zhang Yang's words surprised Kizaru. The next moment, he saw Zhang Yang vacate his left hand holding the hilt of the knife. When he lifted it up, a blood-red light group appeared in his palm, and countless rays of light burst into it. Come. The 91,000-handed knockout cannon of the Broken Way. Boom, boom, boom. These blood-red rays of light directly collided with the countless light bombs blasting towards Zhang Yang, and in an instant, the sound of explosions continued to sound, and in the smoke, they could not see each other. However, Zhang Yang was obviously stronger. The blood-colored light broke through the obstacles of the light bullet and shot directly in front of Kizaru. The extremely fast speed made it difficult for him to dodge even for a while, but at this time Kuzan's figure had already appeared in front of him. Ice wall. Kuzan stretched out his palm forward. In an instant, a thick ice wall suddenly condensed. When the blood-colored light continued to bombard the ice wall, it made a rumbling sound. Although the strong impact force made Kuzan retreat continuously, the blood-colored light continued to retreat. There is always no breakthrough defense. When the light disappeared, the ice wall also disappeared, and the figures of Kuzan and Kizaru appeared on the ground, solemnly watching the battle behind the smoke. Although it was a sneak attack, Zhang Yang's knife did not relax in the slightest, but because of distraction, this cut towards Zephyr was not as powerful as 70% of what it was before. Although the ground on which Zephyr was standing was sunken, but because Zephyr was blocking with his arms, so this move was largely ineffective. Double bones. One strike is not enough, but two moves are required. Zhang Yang slams the Rou blade Ruohuo into the bottom, and when Zephyr is exhausted just after blocking the Ryu blade Ruohuo slash, he rolls armament Reiki in an instant, and punches with both fists. Slow and fast, hitting Zephyr in the chest. In an instant, the powerful impact force, even if Zephyr had already reflected it, the steel-colored arms blocked it, but under the bones, Zephyr's figure flew upside down like a kite with a broken string. Boom boom boom. The strong inertia made Zephyr fly out very quickly, hitting the ground like a ball. The ground along the way either cracked or cracked, and then with a bang, Zephyr's figure crashed into the forest. There was an endless stream of noises, and the trees were directly smashed by Zephyr. After a loud noise was heard again, the forest was already extremely ruined, and the dust and mist filled the air. Chapter 157 Rolling 3 Admiral. After being knocked flying all the way and breaking dozens of trees, Zephyr's figure was smashed to the ground and covered by the dust mist, but Zephyr's whisper was also heard. Go and pursue what you call justice. Go. Gollum. Kuzan and Kizaru sucked in a breath of cold air. They both swallowed sharply, recalling the previous scene, dumbfounded, looking at Zhang Yang's figure, and said in horror, "It's too strong. Even if you defeat Teacher Zephyr, you still keep your hand." The powerful move that was like a flame tornado when killing a Kainu was useless. Facing such a powerful publicity from the bottom of their hearts, Kuzan and Kizaru are really reluctant to do it, because 80% of them will lose. At this time, after repelling Zephyr, Zhang Yang pulled out the flowing blade that was inserted into the ground, and slowly walked towards Kizaru and Kuzan, step by step, causing the two admirals' brows to wrinkle deeper and deeper, and his face more dignified. Now it's your turn. Zhang Yang fell with a bang. The flames on the flowing blade Ruohuo suddenly became agitated, and the roaring sound continued. The next moment, Zhang Yang's figure suddenly disappeared between steps. Kuzan and Kizaru were stunned for a moment. For a moment, the figure suddenly burst back suddenly. And in an instant, Zhang Yang's figure suddenly appeared in the position where they had just stopped, and it was already cut down with a knife, but it was Zongkong. Both Kizaru and Kuzan were a little annoyed, but fortunately they were alert in time and stepped back, but there was also horror in their eyes. This speed is too fast, dozens of times faster than shaving. I am not so lucky to be able to escape this time. And just when the two admirals were distracted, Zhang Yang's figure disappeared again, and when he appeared in front of them, Lu Ren Ruohuo had already rolled the violent flames, and slashed at them with a whistling, and at the same time, Zhang Yang's voice also reached in their ears. Kizaru Kuzan's legs suddenly turned steel-colored, and the next moment, like steel, he kicked heavily on the blade. During the stalemate, cracks appeared on the ground under their feet, and the next moment they collapsed. Laser light. Mouth chick. At this time, Kizaru stretched out his hand towards Zhang Yang, and a laser beam quickly blasted towards Zhang Yang. At the same time, Kuzan condensed the cold air on his right arm, and an ice bird emerged from it. Wherever it passed, even the air was filled with frozen for it. With a strong impact, it is going straight to Zhang Yang. However, Zhang Yang's eyes did not fluctuate in the slightest, and he directly lifted it on the edge of fire. When the two admirals felt relieved, the next moment Zhang Yang slammed them down again before they were caught off guard. Boom boom boom. The figures of the two turned into black shadows and smashed directly towards the ground. The ground collapsed, and when a huge pit appeared, smoke lingered. And the laser beam and the ice bird had already come to Zhang Yang in the slash. Zhang Yang did not hesitate at all, with a 360-degree rotation of the flowing blade like a fire, and Zhang Yang faintly became a flaming flame. A small flame tornado rushed into the flames in two attacks. Without the slightest resistance, it was directly drowned. Come out, you won't die at this level. When Zhang Yang's voice fell, a dazzling light and a flash of ice flashed, and the two figures had appeared behind Zhang Yang, but now the two admirals were a little embarrassed, not to mention the dust all over their bodies, and some blood spilled from the corners of their mouths. Kizaru came and whistled towards Zhang Yang with a lightsaber in his hand. Kuzan had several ice spears appearing all over his body. Once they appeared, they shot out directly, and at the same time, his figure was galloping forward in the icy debris. Burning hell. The flowing blade in Zhang Yang's hand was raging and the flames rushed to the surroundings, acting as a large-scale sea of fire, and then the next moment, with the wave of the flowing blade Ruohuo, dozens of fire pillars that reached the sky suddenly appeared at this moment. The sky was shaking, and it smashed directly on the sea of fire. At this time, several fire pillars reaching the sky were approaching the two admirals, so that they could not give up the attack, and turn to dodge. Kuzan shouted, Ice Age. There was cold air coming out of both hands. One hand was aimed at the ground, and the other was facing the fire pillar. In an instant, the sea of fire on the ground gradually solidified, and it turned into a smooth and translucent layer of ice. It was those fire pillars that seemed to contain terrifying energy, but Kuzan's cold air didn't freeze them. When it's still scary, everything will turn into nothingness. As soon as Zhang Yang's voice fell, Kizaru and Kuzan's faces suddenly changed. Their faces were ugly, and they hurriedly elementalized to prepare to escape from here, but it seemed that it was too late. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the ice crystal ice block on the giant pillar was suddenly swallowed up, and together with the ice layer on the ground, it was slammed into flames at this moment, and turned into a flame again. As the pillar of fire expanded, the terrifying breath flowed out. The fire pillars all exploded, and the rumblings sounded one after another, and the mushroom clouds spread toward the sky. At this moment, in the square of Alabasta, a huge screen is playing this devastating scene. All the marine civilians and royal families are watching in shock at this moment. No matter how many people there are, but there was no sound, it was as quiet as death. It is no exaggeration to hear the needle falling. The grunts of swallowing saliva, the sound of sucking in a breath of cold air, etc., echoed in an endless stream, including the 4 vice admiral gathered here. The whole audience was shocked, and they all spoke with a look of astonishment. How can he be so strong? Zephyr Admiral is a veteran of Marine's headquarters. Although he is old, his strength is not weak. Marine's strongest combat power is no exaggeration, but this man defeated Zephyr Admiral directly in a short period of time. Even if Kizaru and Kuzan joined forces, he didn't have the upper hand. Could it be that Marine, with all 3 admirals out, will also be defeated in the face of death? Does Alabasta really want to surrender to this man? Could it be that this battle will make Marine lose face and let the world know Marine's incompetence? Chapter 158 Kuchiki Byakuya Looking for Trouble. Because of the telephonic broadcast, the images of the 3 Admiral and the Grim Reaper were shown on screens in various regions of the world. The square of the Sabayati Islands was crowded with people, all of whom looked shocked. Rayleigh was sitting on a tall building, drinking, watching the image on the screen, showing a smile. This guy, but more and more terrifying, after the war, I don't know how he will shock the world, entering a new era. At this time, in the world government, in the Marine headquarters, whether it is Tenryubito, Gorosei, 5 elders, or the Marines, they are all watching the images on the screen, but the atmosphere is no longer depressed, but with panic and shock. The 3 Admiral didn't take much advantage of this god of death, and they have already fallen into a disadvantage. God, this is Marine's strongest combat power. The conference room of Marineford Marine headquarters, all the forces above Vice Admiral gathered again, watching the battle scene playing on the screen hanging in front of him. Those who are familiar with Zhang Yang know that Zhang Yang has a great sword that can emit high-temperature flames, and this is the one that is in the hands of the god of death on the screen at the moment. That person. But if it is really that person, how did he come back to life? Why did he go to trouble with Marine? Trouble with the world government? Why didn't he go to his enemies, Whitebeard and the others? For the time being, let's not care why this god of death has a flamboyant saber, and let's not care who his true identity is. Sengoku's face was gloomy, and his fist slammed the table directly, causing a shock, and he said furiously, "At present, the most important thing is that the 3 admirals are all down, which makes our Marine's face hang. This matter can't be good at all. If the situation changes in the end, it's okay to win. If it really loses in the end, Marine will not only lose face, but also the so-called justice and security. How does this make the world believe in us? Marine, let's Marines believe in themselves." Although Sengoku also has some suspicions about the identity of the death god at this moment, it is obviously inappropriate to discuss this matter now. He is a marshal, and he wants to support the military power, justice, dignity, and security of the entire Marine. "Sengoku, let me go." Garp didn't eat the senbei anymore, and stood up abruptly. Although he was also suspicious of the god of death, the current situation was serious, and he also knew how to behave and what attitude he should have toward the god of death. Although his hair is a little white, but my iron fist is still the power of my youth. Garp, stay obedient, even if you go with Marshal Sengoku. If you win, you can't cover up the loss of Marine 3 Admiral in the hands of the god of death. Although you can save some face, do you think it will be useful? Only 5 Marines with peak combat power were able to defeat the Grim Reaper. Staff officer, he sat on the chair and said coldly, and continued, the most fearful thing is that if you go, in case you lose, and even if the fight is a tie and a stalemate is reached, at that time, we Marines should how it ends. Of course, with all the combat power of our Marines, with tragic casualties, it is possible to defeat the god of death, but the consequences of doing so will be unprecedented, and the consequences will be more serious than if Marshal Admiral lost. The words of Staff Officer Crane echoed in the minds of everyone present, making their faces dignified and ugly. Sengoku stretched out on the chair, helpless in his heart. In this live broadcast around the world, we have no the way to cut off the signal. Now, I can only watch them. Hopefully, tenses won't be more serious. Sengoku, Garp and Crane all know why Zhang Yang died. Apart from winning or losing, the most worried thing at this moment is the identity of the god of death. If it is really that man. So, the purpose of his live broadcast this time is not only to slap his face. What else is there to do? Do you want to announce that he is still alive and the truth of his death? Thinking of this, the 3 of them felt scared for a while. But this idea is like nightmare. No matter what it is, it can't be suppressed, but now they have to sit still and watch the screen, waiting for that moment to come. On the calm waters of the New World, the Mobilia was sailing slowly, but before the great battle that took place in Abalstadt began, an uninvited guest came to Whitebeard's ship. Who are you? Don't you know this is the Whitebeard pirates? I saw an unfamiliar, strange man suddenly burst out from the sea, jumped directly to the Mobilia, and the pirates around him raised their knives and guns at him. If you don't want to die, just get out of here. Finally on Whitebeard's ship. This figure is naturally Kuchiki Byakuya, who came from the Marine headquarters. He didn't take a boat all the way, and broke out and galloped all the way from the sea at full speed. Kuchiki Byakuya looked at these pirates and muttered to himself. Opening, Marco, captain of the first team, whereas Vista, captain of the 5th team. Speaking madly, coming here so offended, and wanting to find the captains, is really courting death. A pirate with an ugly face. The next moment he even raised his knife and slashed towards Kuchiki Byakuya, but the next moment he was stopped by a shouting sound, and then several figures came towards here. The captains are here. Now you won't have any good fruit to eat. Let's get out of here. The shout just now was made by Marco. He looked at Byakuya Kuchiki and said suspiciously, it's not a wise choice to make trouble on Dad's boat. Kuchiki Byakuya could feel that the person in front of him and the people accompanying him were much stronger than the people he had just met when he got on the boat, and his expression became a little dignified. I'm here to find Marco and Vista. Looking for me? Vista was taken aback, and Marco was taken aback as well, and said, I'm Marco, do you have anything to do with me? What's the matter? Kuchiki Byakuya sneered. Vengeance. Chapter 159 Bankai. Senbon Sakura Kujiyoshi. Vengeance. Marco was stunned, but the next moment Kuchiki Byakuya's figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of Marco. When he punched, even Marco didn't respond, and was directly knocked into the air by the powerful impact. Going out, but was caught by the huge Jozu. So fast. There was a hint of horror in everyone's eyes, and at this time, seeing that this strange visitor was asking for trouble, the surrounding pirates took long knives and directly chopped towards Kuchiki Byakuya. Don't get in the way. A chill flashed in Kuchiki Byakuya's eyes, and then he said, I came here only to kill those 2 people. When he glanced at Marco and Vista, an extremely repressive and domineering aura was directly centered on Kuchiki Byakuya, and it was like an air wave that quickly spread out towards the surroundings. The surrounding pirates also fell heavily on the deck at this moment, and it was difficult to move, as if there was an inexplicable force like a big hand, suppressing them so that they could not get up. Conqueror hockey like daddy. Everyone who hasn't fainted is shocked, but Marco's eyes are a little weird. It's not quite the same. But before the words were finished, when a sonic boom sounded in the air, Kuchiki Byakuya came to Marco again and punched him directly in the chest, but this time Marco reacted, and the green flames like two wings. When the fist hits, it has already blocked his chest. But even so, the powerful impact still caused his figure to quickly retreat. Vista's face was gloomy, and two swords were taken out from behind. At this moment, it was like a tiger descending the mountain, and when he jumped up, he slashed directly at Kuchiki Byakuya. Whoosh! When a long knife was unsheathed, Byakuya Kuchiki waved with Senbon Sakura in one hand, blocking Vista's attack, and when he looked away, he saw a huge diamond-shaped figure on his right arm, rushing directly towards him. The 61-6 stand light prison of the Tao. When a voice that seemed to be chanting sounded, Jozu had already come to Byakuya Kuchiki, but just as he was about to punch down, Byakuya Kuchiki moved, and in his puzzled expression, he slowly lifted the air. Holding left hand. When a few dazzling lights rushed out of the palm of his hand, Jozu's chest had already inserted 6 pieces of light. No matter what he did, he would not be able to move. How come? Under Captain Vista's double swords, he caught it with one hand. Not only that, but also made Captain Jozu unable to move. Who the hell is he? Just in the amazement of everyone, Kuchiki Byakuya raised his left hand and rushed out a blue beam from his fingers, which immediately hit Vista's chest, and then with a wave of the long knife, Vista was directly knocked into the air. Go! Go! The pirates who were still standing swarmed towards Kuchiki Byakuya at this moment, and Marco, who had turned into a phoenix, also galloped forward, not enough for the next moment, but his figure froze and shouted anxiously, "Go back!" Quote. Scatter. Senbon Sakura. Following the murmur, the blade in Kuchiki Byakuya's hand quickly disintegrated, as if it turned into countless sharp blades, and once it appeared, it blasted away in all directions. The number of these sharp knives is in the thousands. Jozu was fine, and he turned into a diamond man, but the speed of the sharp knives was so fast that some people were shot by the sharp knives before they came to Jozu's back. A series of screams sounded one after another. Marco turns into a phoenix. Under these seemingly endless sharp blades, his recovery ability is still a little bit behind. Until the end of the sharp blade attack at a certain moment, except for Jozu, the rest of the people are more or less injured, but fortunately no one died. Marco's mouth. As for the injury on his body, he was covered with green flames and was constantly being treated. I don't know at that moment, but Marco moved, turned into a phoenix and roared, and immediately rushed behind Kuchiki Byakuya, rolling Chinyan's right leg and slammed it towards his waist at this moment. Although you are strong, you are by no means an opponent with a razor-sharp edge. Tell me who killed Zhang Yang. Kuchiki Byakuya reacted so quickly that he grabbed Marco's right leg almost as soon as he was about to kick him, and smashed it out. At this moment, an angry voice sounded, "Come to my boat, let's not talk about trouble, but still it would be too arrogant to hurt my sons." Dad. When a tall figure appeared in front of Byakuya Kuchiki, an extremely terrifying aura, with Haki who reigned over the world, all came to suppress Byakuya Kuchiki. Byakuya Kuchiki's expression was unprecedentedly solemn, and he turned the captain-level leader. All the spiritual pressure poured out at this moment. When the two momentums collided, there was no distinction between high and low. When there was a roar, the entire sea shook a bit. The sea surface rippled, and the waves rose one after another, like a dance of demons, shaking the Mobidia constantly. It's even the same as the old man's aura. Marco and others looked shocked, and the next moment Whitebeard said, "Sons, stay far away, watch me clean up this ignorant boy." However, despite saying this, Whitebeard's expression was solemn. When a circular air circle appeared on the body of the knife, it smashed directly towards Kuchiki Byakuya. "It should be you." A flash of coldness flashed in Kuchiki Byakuya's eyes, and when Senbon Sakura in his hand collided with Whitebeard's broadsword, the air vibrated instantly. I don't know when the sky is also a dark cloud, and the most shocking thing is that with the collision of the two long knives, the dark cloud is split. Regardless of strength or weakness, both of them stepped back, and Byakuya Kuchiki dropped the Senbon Sakura in his hand vertically to the ground, but the next moment the long sword seemed to melt into the ground and disappeared instantly. At the same time, 1,000 gigantic blades rose from Kuchiki Byakuya's feet, each of which shattered and produced countless blades. Whoosh whoosh. When these nearly 100 million blades appeared, they formed a woundless circle around Byakuya Kuchiki himself. Bankai, Senbon Sakura Kujiyoshi. Chapter 160th West Remnant Sun Prison Clothes. Alabasta, now there is smoke everywhere. Zephyr is indeed defeated by Zhang Yang, but he is ashamed of Zhang Yang, and the actions of the world government are chilling, so even if he still has the strength to fight at this moment, he did not participate in the war, and acted as the role of bystander. Ice picks, light bullets, ice spears, and beams of light constantly blasted out and confronted the raging flames. For a time, explosions continued to sound one after another, smoke lingered, the speed of light shining, the translucent ice block, and the violent flames, raging on each other, constantly ascension, but constantly swallowed by flames. Kizaru and Kuzan are indeed stronger than Zephyr. Zhang Yang knows that although he has the upper hand with one enemy and two, it is still difficult to defeat the two without a little effort. After all, the increase in the strength of Kizaru Kuzan from the Logia Devil Fruit cannot be underestimated. Boom, boom. In a blink of an eye, Zhang Yang's double bones and armament slammed directly into the chests of Kuzan and Kizaru. Even if they were elemental, it would be fine. The strong impact made the figures of the two admiral like kites with broken strings. Suddenly rushed towards the sea. Just as he was about to hit the sea, an ice cone suddenly appeared in Kuzan's palm, facing the sea, and the sea quickly solidified and froze. The strong inertia caused Kuzan and Kizaru to smash on the thick ice one after another, leaving shocking pits. Kuzan and Kizaru were a little embarrassed at this time, their bodies were covered with burn marks, and their clothes were covered in blood. After smashing them on the ice a few times, Elemental returned directly to the ground, panting and looking at Zhang Yang in front of them. It's about to end. When the hoarse voice came out, it made Kizaru and Kuzan look even more difficult. Zhang Yang continued, the next press conference will be very exciting. And I have been looking forward to that moment. Now I can't wait. Quote. The blade is like fire. While Zhang Yang murmured, the flame on the flaming blade slowly faded away. When the flame dissipated at a certain moment, the blade of the flaming blade suddenly had fire smoke rising up, and the flaming blade suddenly formed a quaint and unsophisticated handle. Eye-catching sword. Zhang Yang's eyes narrowed, and a hoarse voice spread out, Bankai. The residual fire is two-sword. Remnant fire Tadaushi, remnant sun prison clothes. Zhang Yang poured out all the spiritual pressure in his body, which was very close to the commander-in-chief at this moment. The spiritual pressure seemed to spontaneously combust, blazing flames, and the flame's spiritual pressure instantly covered Zhang Yang's body and blade. Boom. Zhang Yang is like a raging flame, and the flames continue to whistle. At this time, his figure is like a fire god. On the other side, on the Mobidia. With a fierce momentum, the sharp blade of a million lines approached Whitebeard's side. Kuchiki Byakuya said in a cold voice, Senbon Sakura Kujiyoshi. As soon as the words fell, these billions of sharp blades condensed into a translucent spherical object, which directly surrounded Whitebeard. Seeing this scene, everyone was worried about Whitebeard. Dad, are you alright? Dad. Marco and the others were a little anxious, and even wanted to shoot for a moment, but Whitebeard's voice suddenly sounded. I'm Whitebeard, if such an attack can knock me down, what can I do to protect my sons? Click, click. Two bursts of air suddenly swayed out of the sharp blade ball. Kuchiki Byakuya frowned, and when a strong shock suddenly came out, the sharp blade ball exploded directly, revealing Whitebeard's figure. The next moment, Whitebeard carried the big knife, with the ability to shock, and with a powerful momentum, he slashed directly at Byakuya Kuchiki, but in a flash, Byakuya Kuchiki directly recalled the blasted sharp blades again, in front of him. Formed a defensive wall. Boom. The sound of the air cracking was accompanied by a violent collision. At this moment, it became a stalemate. The dead wood behind the defensive wall, Bai's eye, stretched out his palm, and a red glow suddenly appeared, and a flame suddenly rushed out from his palm. Coming straight to Whitebeard. King Fire falls. Gulululu. Boy, you can't beat me like this. Whitebeard laughed loudly, and slammed his left fist forward. When the air burst, a powerful impact collided with the flame, but no one could do anything. Final view. White Emperor Sword. Kuchiki Byakuya's face was gloomy. When the spiritual pressure of his body was released, a pair of wings formed behind him. At the same time, the defensive wall in front of Kuchiki Byakuya also collapsed at this moment, and the sharp blades kept gathering in his hands. On the hilt of the sword, a chill also spread around at this moment. White Emperor Sword. Kuchiki Byakuya carried the White Emperor Sword and kept colliding with Whitebeard's big sword, and the water molecules in the atmosphere suddenly turned into flying knives as the White Emperor Sword continued to swing, blasting towards Whitebeard. And every time Whitebeard slashes, it has the ability to shake the fruit, and the air oscillates, directly smashing these flying knives. Who is this person? He was able to draw a tie with Dad. When did this powerful figure appear in the sea? Seeing that neither of them could do anything about the other, Marco and the others were shocked and spoke in horror. And the next moment, as Whitebeard and Kuchiki Byakuya broke apart, Whitebeard laughed loudly, Guru Lulu. If we fight again, my Morbidia will be destroyed. Did you say you won't fight if you don't fight? What about the publicity's hatred? Kuchiki Byakuya held the White Emperor Sword with a gloomy expression. Zhang Yang's death was framed by someone. What's your relationship with him? Whitebeard asked suspiciously. I don't know who Zhang Yang is, but the Rairin Ruahuo in his hand is Captain Yamamoto's Zanpakudo. If it wasn't for the captain personally entrusted him, he would not have owned it. Seeing that Whitebeard's expression didn't seem like a lie, Kuchiki Byakuya said solemnly, Captain Yamamoto is the captain of the other world Gotei 13, and I am the captain of the 6th Division, and we are subordinates. I'm here this time to find traces of Captain Yamamoto. You didn't kill it, but who else?